What's a mook?
A mook? What's a mook?
You can't call me a mook.
I can't?
No.
I give you mook.
And happy Halloween, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Movies with the Mooks night. Nighttime with the Mooks, Halloween. Fuck.
The count.
It's a horrible intro. But there must be no stopping. There must be no stopping at all.
Yeah, no, we don't do second takes, man. What you guys see is real.
Exactly.
All of the little errors and no, but we made it, man. We made it to the countdown.
I know. We got through some great films. Got and got to have some good conversations. I think tonight we're excited for what we're going to be talking about, which is a movie that we just watched tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Want to tell us what that is?
So this is probably the first time, I think, so far with our episodes, this is the first time we've directly watched a movie right before a show and talked about it.
Yep.
So what that movie was, we thought we wanted to pick a really fitting Halloween one to kind of end this countdown. So we went with a little movie called Trick or Treat.
Yes, Trick or Treat from the year 2007. What a perfect film for Halloween night especially. You know, we really wanted one that was like specifically Halloween themed, not just a generic horror film, but something that was actually related to the occasion. And it's my first time watching it. Oliver, I think you'd seen it before.
Yeah, I've seen it once or maybe even twice before. But yeah, this was kind of, I guess this was one of my recommendations to do for tonight. And I think it was a good way to do it. We're probably not going to just talk about Trick or Treat. We were thinking we might even talk about some of the other movies, new movies that we saw this in this month of October.
Yeah, so that's what we'll do. We're going to talk a little bit about Trick or Treat, and then we're going to have a little conversation catching up on everything that we watched this month, horror-related and that sort of thing. There was a number of new ones for myself, and a number of new ones for you, I gather, as well.
Yeah.
And that's how this show is going to proceed. We're going to try and keep it somewhat short because I don't know what time it is. What is it? 1:30 a.m. now?
I think at this point it is 1:30, almost maybe exactly. This is... I know we've finished shows later at this time, but I don't know if we've started a show in the past this. Yeah, it's 1:33.
Yeah.
This might be the latest time we started a show, but you know what?
Well, let's wrap it up right now.
I think, again, it's fitting that for the last Halloween podcast, it should be at the witching hour.
You're right.
You know?
I agree. It's at the witching hour. It is Halloween night, and we're going to have this episode out to you by... by like 5 p.m.
Yeah.
5 p.m.
Technically
Halloween
much
night.
later today. Yeah.
Yep. When you're all out. So when you're all back from trick-or-treating, you can come home and you can sit down and listen to this episode and eat all your candy.
Mm-hmm. And
on that note, I'm going to flick this light off because it was exclusively on for the show.
There we go.
But we actually like to do this by candlelight. It's much better. It's a much more intimate, romantic setting. No, just kidding. That'll be for rom-com night. This is
now I know why you want
Halloween
this table. You want to always have that distance. It's because it's too romantic.
Just so we don't get too close here. Yeah.
But well, I guess before we go into the other movies, let's definitely dive into Trick or Treat. Now, this is kind of probably compared to some of the other titles we've been talking about in our other shows. This is probably kind of more of a newer-ish kind of title. Not super new, but, definitely not an oldie.
It's so funny to think of it as a new movie, right? Because it's like 2007, and I think like, oh, that was just like when I graduated, but that was like half my life ago now.
Yeah, I did not realize it was as old as that. I would have thought... I don't know. For some reason, I thought this movie was at least like 2010 or 11, but 2007, man. That kind of is going back a bit. But at least it's been around.
16 years ago.
Yeah, but hopefully long enough that enough people have seen it that it won't be a big deal if we say some spoilers, because as we usually do, we're pretty much into the spoilers. So.
This is a spoiler. A spoiler abundant show.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it is nice. I feel like this era of movies, like the 2000s, like prior to 2010 or so, like things were still pretty good in the in the world of movies, and there's still quite a bit of good stuff coming out, and this movie was no exception. I gotta admit, I would definitely rewatch this many times over. It was kind of like Monster Squad that way. I was like, I'm gonna like definitely make this a staple of the Halloween season, and largely because of amazing production design that's just so classic. The whole streets, the city streets, with the pumpkins everywhere, people being out trick-or-treating. There's like a carnival going on. All the autumn leaves. It's just that kind of movie that you really want to spend time in during the autumn season, particularly October and Halloween. And it's a great watch. It's a great experience purely from that standpoint.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it because, I guess for our listeners, after we watched the movie, we didn't really discuss too much. So right now, I'm kind of hearing Kevin's opinion for the first time. I mean, I had a feeling that he enjoyed it, but
well, and I was deliberately trying not to talk about it because it's like, we try and save these conversations for the show, but I definitely had a good experience watching it, and I thought in like beyond just the amazing production design and all that sort of thing, it's actually quite an interesting little intertwining of various different stories going on all at once and converging.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a really interesting little arc. It's told in a non-linear format, which works quite well. Very effective in how it brings things together from the beginning of the movie and then also kind of ending where it began.
Yeah, it's I've always enjoyed anthology horror films, and Trick or Treat is essentially an anthology film, but unlike most of them where, they kind of, there's usually an overall story that's broken up into mini stories, and once a story starts and then it finishes and that's the end of it. But what's nice with Trick or Treat is all the stories you kind of jump back and forth. Sometimes they kind of overlap, and then by the end it kind of all comes full circle. So it doesn't really feel like an anthology movie, and yet it is really kind of broken up into sort of four or five sort of different storylines. And it's fairly like a short movie. It's, it's under 90 minutes.
I was going to mention that. Yeah. An hour and 22 minutes, I think it was, which is sort of surprising. I mean, I feel like you don't get that many feature films that are that short, and yet it doesn't feel short.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel that short. I mean, they pack quite a bit of content into that small amount of time, and you never feel like you're sitting around waiting for things to happen.
Yeah, it's definitely a fast-paced movie.
But it's also not like too fast paced. Like I feel like they give you plenty of time to let these moments sink in.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, when they're down discovering the bus, I don't know how much we're just like randomly throwing our listeners into the midst of this story, but there's that scene where the kids go down they take that little elevator, they go down and they discover the bus. The one main girl of the group, she's recounting this story of how all these special needs kids had been essentially murdered by a bus driver who was hired by their parents to, create a fake bus accident and just to get rid of them, because I guess these parents didn't want their kids anymore, their handicapped kids. And so she tells this like spooky story about how that had happened, and you see kind of this series of flashbacks showing it happen, and then they go down there, and it's like the guy had driven the bus into this rock quarry, and they all go down to the rock quarry to try and find the bus, and it's down there, and I don't know, it's just dramatically. They let this experience kind of sink in gradually to the viewer, and it feels it doesn't feel like it's rushed or anything like that.
No, it's a really nice little sort of segue from the rest of the movie. It's the one thing where the whole movie takes place on Halloween night, but this story that's being told that you see in flashbacks is really the only part of the movie that you get to actually see, you know, daytime autumn. And it's really nice. I don't know. It's a nice kind of change. It watching it again, I never noticed how bright it seemed, like transitionally compared to all the other night stuff where I'm like, oh, wow, like, yeah, like that sun's really coming through.
Yeah.
Because you never really see it for the rest of the movie, but it's just got this nice kind of orange kind of glow to it. And it's, I don't know. Yeah, it's one of the sequences that kind of sticks with me a lot when I think about this movie. I mean,
the flashback sequence. Yeah,
it almost felt like that easily could have been a feature length movie in of itself if you were to kind of like stretch it out. Maybe I was gonna say, I don't know. Were you bringing this one up? Is this one maybe your favorite of the storylines, or do you have an idea of which one maybe you liked the most
of the storylines that are all going on?
Yeah, in Trick or Treat.
Yeah, I would probably say so. So essentially, you've got like three major stories. Well, there's sort of the bus driver storyline with the kids, the murdered kids, and that ties into the younger kids who are going to try and find where the bus accident had happened. Then you've also got that storyline of the witches, and that was kind of weird and random. But
the storyline of with the witches,
or I don't know, if the werewolf,
okay.
Like
I get you, yeah.
Those hot werewolf chicks, those hot chicks who turn into werewolves.
Yeah.
So you have that one going on, and then you've also got the story of the murderer guy who ends up being
almost cosplaying as a vampire, but actually attacking people. That was a busy night for that dad. You know, he had a lot going on that night.
He got around.
And then if there's sort of the connector, it seems maybe to all the stories, it's the little trick or treater with the kind of burlap sack, you know, head. Who, by the way, I don't know if you caught it. So that character's name is Sam.
Oh, okay.
I think it's short for Sam Hain, which is sort of the original kind of pagan term for Halloween.
Oh, okay.
And that's why I kind of think of him as like the spirit of Halloween. You know, he's kind of got this moral code of, you know, it's like if you're not celebrating properly like everyone else, he's going to come after you.
Yeah, and he's kind of got this omnipresence too, because he sort of touches every story that's going on too. Eh?
Yeah,
and shows up.
And that's the thing I guess I find with any kind of horror anthologies is there's always some sort of link that connects all the stories. Many times it's just the storyteller himself. Like, you know, there's the old Tales from the Crypt movie where the Crypt Keeper's kind of telling a story to each of them. And there's always sort of some connector. And it seems like in Trick or Treat, it's the Sam character. And most of the time, he's not really doing all that much. A lot of times, he's just kind of like watching. And you're like, what's this guy's story? But then, you know, near the end, they kind of give him his own little story in the group that they kind of end the movie on. Which is a nice kind of wraparound to the whole thing. And yeah, I don't know, as Kevin was saying, I really like the production design, you know, everything from just like the pumpkins and the leaves and this kind of Halloween carnival that's going on.
It's worth noting too that this movie is shot right in our own backyard. It's shot in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And that's always kind of nice to see, because it's like you're looking at this beautiful aesthetic and you're like, wait a minute, we live here. Like this is what Halloween actually looks like. And it's a very familiar, like, I feel like anytime I'm walking around the neighborhood that I live in, it's like just like that, you know, the types of decorations people have set up, these old heritage homes and stuff. Like watching the movie, I was trying to see, do I recognize any of those houses? Because they shoot in the neighborhood by my apartment.
I could
quite frequently, and I'm like, could have been one of those houses. I didn't specifically recognize any of them, but it could have been a lot of other places too, right? But
yeah, no. I mean, it easily could have been New West for all I know. Yeah, I don't know. It's just so. I mean, when I saw the movie even the first time, I mean, I didn't find this movie to be particularly scary, but it was just enjoyable. Like, it's just a fun movie.
Yeah. That's just it too. And there are some things that are kind of freaky too. Like even that first scene when the boyfriend guy who was dressed as a robot, or no, his girlfriend was dressed as a robot.
Yeah.
He like comes out to dismantle all the kind of the ghost figurines that are set up, and he discovers that his girlfriend's been murdered, and her head is mounted on a pike basically underneath one of these sheets, and her limbs are hanging out of the trees. It's like, so I'm sure people have seen those prosthetic limbs that you can buy in a Halloween shop. It's like they have a whole bunch of those hanging out of their tree, but then when he comes out, his girlfriend's body has been dismembered, and like her limbs are hanging out of the tree now too. It was just like really graphic, and well, it wasn't actually that graphic the way they depicted it, but conceptually it's very graphic. It's like this horrific thing happened to somebody that you care about, and when it's revealed that her head is on that stick, it was just like, fuck, what a thing to have happen.
And yet it's another one of those examples of a lot of the characters in the movie who kind of get their comeuppance are characters who kind of don't respect the holiday traditions of Halloween. At the beginning of the movie, the girlfriend who's dressed up as the robot, I think she like blows out a jack-o'-lantern candle.
Yeah,
or
she wanted to wrap it up too early.
Yeah, and I think the boyfriend said he's like, no, you can't put these out, you know. And and the little Sam trick-or-treater, you know, he was watching from across the street, and you know, so that's what did her in, you know. She just
Is that a thing? Are you not supposed to blow out jack-o'-lantern candles?
It's probably,
because I admit I've done that many times.
I could see an unofficial rule being like, just let them burn out on their own, you know.
Yeah, otherwise you'll be cursed with bad luck.
Well, definitely don't blow them out at like 8 p.m., right? Like, you want to let them at least, you know, because the idea is like, even if you're packing it in for the night, there's going to be kids walking on the streets. Like, let them keep it being lit for them. It's not like it's not like a lit jack-o'-lantern's ever like burned down a property. Like, they just they'll eventually go out. They're mushy and slimy inside, so I don't really find that there's any risk to keeping a jack-o'-lantern lit.
And that's why she deserved to die.
Well, yeah, you know, she just didn't follow the rules.
Yeah,
if you noticed, the boyfriend didn't die. You know, he saw his dead girlfriend, but you know, he's going to live a long, prosperous life with many more Halloweens to go.
Even though he was watching that porno film while she got murdered, like, what a... You know, the
message is very clear. You know, don't fuck with Halloween, but you know, you can fuck with porn.
But it's okay to watch porn. Man.
It's part of the Halloween spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. I know you wanted to. Well, one of the reasons we watched this movie actually was Oliver had. I mean, I know you'd seen it before, but you were saying one of the actresses in your film, Eat It Raw, was involved in the movie.
Actress Tracy Froese. This was like, I think one of the first things she ever did in the industry was that she was the photo double for Anna Paquin's character in the movie. And you might even be able to find online some photos of her in the whole Red Riding Hood getup, which is funny because a few years later I cast her in my own werewolf movie where she played Red Riding Hood in a short. Well, I guess I produced it. I didn't direct it, but it was just kind of an ironic thing that, you know, we kind of brought her back into the red hoodie.
She had a reprisal of that role. Yeah. And I'm. Man, what a fun... That must have been a fun experience, I would think, to work on a movie like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's... they shot this movie, like, I guess just a few years before I'd actually moved out here.
Yeah, that would have been like a year or so before I moved... Or no. Yeah, maybe a couple of years before I moved out here.
Mm-hmm. But it really seems like a fun one. Like, I don't know. It almost seems like it's... Like, maybe even from, like, another... Like, a little, like, other era when... Maybe movies were, you know, just the old. Yeah, I was definitely working on movie sets at this time, but I just wasn't in Vancouver. But I do remember, just overall in general, it seemed like being on sets back in that time was kind of a little bit more magical, maybe should you say?
Well, it was shot on film, as we determined.
Yeah.
So that's a little different. It was like right on the edge of the digital, kind of going totally digital revolution.
And it's curious, like what it would have looked like if it was shot on digital. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I can really tell the difference, but
maybe that's one of the reasons why I don't like stuff from 2010 so much.
Yeah.
Sorry, beyond 2010. And it's not that there's never anything good. It's just, I don't know. And a part of me is like, well, no, that couldn't be it. Because there's some movies that I absolutely love, which are digital. Like David Fincher's shot digital since Zodiac, I think.
Oh yeah.
And
okay.
I mean, I love his movies.
Yeah. Although I do find there's quite a difference in look when you compare, say, like Seven or Fight Club to even Zodiac. Like I do see the difference. But
the question is, does it alter your appreciation of the movie? Because like,
I mean, not really. But
or maybe in a subconscious level it does.
I think it probably does. Well, it's just that thing where I just think I probably would have I would have liked Zodiac just that little bit even more, because I just think it would have probably have looked a little bit better, but I don't think it would have really affected the story. I don't think anything else would have been different other than just the fact that there would have been just, I don't know, a little bit more depth in the shadows, and just it's a hard thing to describe, because it's like, there's so many movies that are digitized in post, but I feel like if it's shot on film, even if it's then color corrected and digitized in the editing, it still somehow captures some magic by it being on film. Maybe it's just that we grew up with so many of those filmed movies, but I don't know.
Yeah, that it's like it is in a very subtle way captures a little bit of what we grew up being familiar with. There could be something to be said for that. But I mean, I gotta say, like, I love Zodiac, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I like Social Network well enough. I really quite like his Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. What was the other one? Gone Girl. Like, those were all great movies.
And to be honest, yeah, like a lot. If I didn't know better, I would have thought probably that I would not have thought that those were all shot digitally. To be honest,
yeah, I wouldn't have known.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be able to tell. But again, it could be like some sort of subtle subconscious thing.
Mm-hmm. But another example of a guy who still shoots on film is Tarantino, and I gotta say, like, it does seem like there's something about those movies that looks good, like not just.
Well, and I always think of like how I love Christopher Nolan's movies, and he shoots on film. It's
has all of his movies been shot on film?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Like he's kind of a purist about shooting film as well.
Well, it's interesting how it does. Like, there's a lot more of these filmmakers who are purists to film than these purists to digital. I mean, there's a lot of directors I think who they've chosen digital, but they don't seem like they're like a purist. It's almost like they'll admit it's kind of more out of convenience, rather than it being better looking.
Like I've heard Peter Jackson and George Lucas and stuff talk about this quite a bit, where it's more like they're very embracing of the new technology, and they're like, look, like it's undeniably a better way, from the sense of, again, just convenience, but also the kind of manipulation of it, the fact that it doesn't degrade and all sorts of other factors, cheaper, just a whole bunch of things.
I mean, in some ways, yeah, you and I we're kind of spoiled because, we've never really had to deal with the pain of waiting to process our film and looking at dailies and or
even just be able to like get playback. Yeah, it's like, okay, we just shot a take, let's see what that looked like. It's like, well, you can see it tomorrow morning.
Yeah So yeah, I mean, as much as I would love to see my footage on film, I would hate the whole process of dealing with all that stuff, and I would immediately digitize all of the film I would record. But yeah, I don't know, I guess if I had a large enough budget for it, if I was given the option, I guess I probably would want to shoot on film. I would.
There's at least certain projects of mine that I have in mind that I would want to shoot on film. Just I don't know even what it is. There's a sensibility that I have where I like an intuition that it's like that would be better shot on film for some reason.
I think even though it's almost started dying out. I think if you're a filmmaker, I think it would be important for all filmmakers to at least have one movie done on film, if you can, if you have the opportunity.
It would probably be worthwhile.
Yeah.
Just so you know, and just so that it, like, as an art form or as a medium, it doesn't completely die out.
Not that I want to spend this whole podcast talking about like film stock.
I was just thinking, we should maybe.
But I was also going to just say one last thing was the other thing that kind of irks me is that film stock also changes decade by decade. So there's a lot of even if you were to shoot on film today, it wouldn't probably look like the same kind of film of the 90s or 80s, and certainly not the 70s. So it's like everything's getting so smooth and polished. What shooting on film today would look like maybe wouldn't be as different than digital, just because everything's just so much slicker in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that it does become harder and harder to differentiate, or to see the difference.
Mm-hmm. But I guess back to the horror movies. I don't know. Yeah. Do you have other things you wanted to say about Trick or Treat?
Yeah, I kind of feel like we should maybe dive in a little bit more to the story and the plot and things of how it pans out.
One thing that I liked was that it's got like, an array of characters, like everybody who's kind of, you got these kind of young adults to senior citizen characters to like children trick-or-treatings. So it's got a little bit for everybody, I mean, there's those elements where you're watching it where you're almost like, oh, this is almost like a mature Goosebumps episode. And then at other times you're like, okay, no, this is definitely a horror movie. And I don't know. Yeah, I guess like this isn't really a movie. Yeah, you wouldn't really want to recommend this to kids unless it's a kid who's seen a lot of horror movies already and they can handle it. But
yeah, it's interesting because in some ways it feels like this kind of innocent movie to me because of the presence of the kids who are trick or treating and also the main Sam, you called him, the main little Halloween horror character. I don't know if you even want to call him a villain. In some ways, like. Interesting how you're sort of rooting for him in some ways.
Well, he's kind of cute, right? He's just the way he moves, and I really wonder whether there was a kid in that costume or if they kind of maybe hired a little person. It's hard to know, right?
Yeah. It is interesting. So I'm thinking about all the different victims in the movie. So you've got the old man who was the bus driver who killed the kids. It's like, okay, it makes sense why they go and haunt him, right? And then you've got that other guy who was a murderer. He what is it? There's that like fat boy who shows up at his house and he was destroying jack-o'-lanterns, and then he like feeds him some poisoned candy or something and kills him, buries him in the backyard. That guy, it makes sense why he meets his fate from those werewolf girls.
It is just interesting that like on top of him just being a killer, like he likes to kill little kids who mess with Halloween. And it almost seems like he's got his own son that you almost think, oh, is he going to even take out his own child? But it almost seems more like he's almost raising his kid to be a psychopath himself.
I don't know if I got that sense. Did you get that sense?
Yeah, well, the whole carving the fat kid's head like a jack-o'-lantern, and the kid's you gotta do the eyes, Dad. You're good at the eyes.
Right.
I don't know, man. Personally, I think there's something. I think that kid's gonna grow up to be a little Michael Myers of his own, basically.
that kind of did go over my head, but now that you mention it, yeah.
The part to me that's just a little bit odd is like, I guess after that, the dad eventually tucks his kid into bed and then goes out dressed as a vampire and continues his killing spree. Yeah. It's
But so like, is he actually a vampire then? Because they took out his fake teeth.
Yeah.
Was he even the same character as the original vampire?
I mean, like I would
is he just
assume
like
he is, but
because he's going after he's going after a variety of different girls. I'm trying to remember who all there's like that one girl who he sucks her blood or punctures her. He bites her and leaves her bloody laying at a bus stop or something.
And that's really the only victim that he bites that we see. I mean,
yeah, but then he goes for the other girl who's actually secretly one of those. That was Anna Paquin's character. Mm-hmm. He like goes and tries to do it to her, right? And then
I guess the thing that to me that's like weird is like I'm assuming he's not actually. I mean, like the teeth aren't real. So why is this non-vampire guy going out and biting women and drinking their blood? Like, unless he's just a whole new level of crazy.
Yeah, these are some of the things that I'm left trying to put the pieces together, and maybe that's again one of the things you said is that this movie has a lot of rewatch value. I totally agree, and maybe that's one of the things that I need to rewatch it for a few times to like try and make better sense of it.
Yeah, it does a lot of. I think it does a lot of things to make it a little bit more complex than maybe some other horror movies. But at the same time, it's not all completely wrapped up in this neat little package. There's definitely things that I think when you think about the movie more, you're kind of like, okay, well, wait, that's kind of, like that doesn't really make sense. But but then I think the idea is more to just kind of watch the movie as a ride. I don't think it's a movie that you're meant to overanalyze it. You're almost. I think, it's filled with a lot of little mini twists, and I think that's what they were kind of going for, even if some of those twists don't really make all that much sense on their own. They're,
they'll leave you scratching your head.
Yeah, like I almost get the feeling like the vampire character, when they were writing the script, it was probably an afterthought to make him the character of the dad. I almost feel like they were like, oh, maybe that's just another way that we can keep tying things together, but other than that, there's actually not like a whole ton of logic to it. But they were like, well, it's either we do that or we just kind of make a completely new character. And maybe they just thought, oh, we'll make it that killer dad character. Because in the end, most of the bad characters in this movie do get their comeuppance. And maybe that was what it just boiled down to, is like, we want to see that guy get his comeuppance in some way.
But I'm still sort of puzzled by that girlfriend, because all she did was blew out a fucking candle. Why did she deserve to die? It's like, why was she a victim?
I don't think it's that she deserved it.
It's just something. Maybe there was something that happened as they were connecting, sort of, they kind of come back to where we first found those characters at the end. Mm-hmm. The end of the movie comes back to where we found those characters at the beginning. Mm-hmm.
I think it just boiled down to, she did it at the wrong place at the wrong time, where that little demon, pumpkin-headed little kid, the Sam character, just happened to see it. Mm-hmm. And
so
and I think it just boiled down to that.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, like, I'm just kind of trying to figure out, like, what were the reasons that these particular individuals were targeted and stuff. But maybe that's all it was. Interesting. Also, one of the interesting little discovery as we were watching. So there's the scene where all those hot chicks end up turning into the werewolves and, feasting on these victims that they've gathered. One of them was a friend of ours who we know from working on set with, Amy. It's quite funny to like just randomly see her pop up there from, 16 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's like, holy shit, is that her? And then we checked the credits, and sure enough, she is. What was she credited as? Like
I think she was Party Girl number 3.
Yeah. Party Girl number 3.
She made it right near the end of the credits there. And also,
I think, a great little cameo. She had like some actual performance, like, doing this crazy possessive sort of transformation things. I'm gonna have to ask her about that. Yeah, there was some great. I really like how. Again, they're just using practical makeup effects for the transformation stuff. Just starting off with just kind of like stuff around like the eyes and the teeth. Yeah, and then when they're like peeling their skin off and stuff, it's just like, Wow, crazy.
Now, was there a brief moment during that scene before the skin was being peeled off where you almost thinking, oh, they're the vampires? And then they just kept changing, and then you're like, oh, they're werewolves.
I was actually thinking of it more like the witches, because it was very similar kind of to that.
The bonfires burning in the woods.
The what was the in the movie The Witches from 1991 or whatever it was that I just watched a couple weeks ago. They do their own transformation, and like her skin, she kind of emerges from this skin that she's like concealed within. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking of it like that. So that's why I keep referring to them as witches.
Yeah. But I thought it was a neat little spin on things by having Anna Paquin dressed up as Little Red Riding Hood to only find out that she's the wolf. Right?
Yeah, well, that was a nice little touch. Mm-hmm. And, surprising too, because she seems like she's, this innocent one. She's like the virgin who's trying to get laid or whatever. And it's funny too, because when the reveal happens that, they're werewolves, it gives a lot more context to all the things that they were talking about like, I'm going to go find like a nice guy for you.
Yeah.
To hook up with, basically, but not knowing that, she's going to hook up with him in this very sinister way.
Yeah. And then Paquin's all like, oh, yeah, again, she's just kind of talking about how it's my first time. They're all like teasing her, just like, oh, just get over with it. We're tired of hearing this. Just do it already.
Yeah.
And
you're thinking, oh, this is just like a bunch of, teenage girls like going out partying or whatever.
Yeah. And even when she like finally does her kill, it's still done in a very sexual way. She kind of mounts the guy and then just, digs into the neck. Yeah. And yeah, I thought that was a really, I'm just, I'm a sucker for werewolf stuff in general, especially if it's done well. Mm-hmm. And even though the werewolf sequence is fairly short in the movie, I liked it. They didn't do my number one crime, which is they weren't CGI werewolves, and so even though they're seen briefly, they look good.
I don't know if part of them were CGI werewolves.
Well, I think some of the transformation part, like you see like the spine kind of popping and that stuff. That was definitely CGI.
It seemed to be a combination of effects, but I would be curious to see what it was like being there on the day. And again, I'll probably have to ask Amy what shooting that was like, because
I should ask Tracy too. Yeah, we get
because
the two sides of it. Yeah,
she would have been there too, because she would have been like the double. Yeah. It's just they looked really good once they're totally transformed. So I'm like, were they animatronics or some kind of costume or? Yeah,
it was probably
puppeteering.
I think it was a combination of a little bit of animatronics and puppetry. Mm-hmm, yeah.
It looked awesome.
I'm even friends with a few local like special effects artists who work on a lot of stuff. I wouldn't even be surprised if if there's a guy I know who might have done some of the effects, because there's a lot of local effects people out here who work on a lot of different stuff, and I bet they grabbed a few local talents for the effects on this movie.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of them. But I've always loved werewolves, so it was, I really wasn't expecting. The first time I saw this movie, I wasn't expecting any werewolves, and so when they showed up, I was just sort of like, oh yeah, thank you. And I don't know, it's a neat little movie. I mean, like,
I wanted to look up the writer director Michael Dougherty here. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Let's see.
So the only thing of his that I know of, I mean, I think Trick or Treat actually might be his first film.
Oh, he was a writer on Superman Returns, X-Men United,
which would explain the Bryan Singer connection.
Yeah.
And then I saw his Krampus movie. So it's kind of neat. It's like he's got his Halloween film and he's got his Christmas film.
And he loves the holidays.
Yeah. We got to wait for his Easter horror movie next. But
he also made Urban Legends Bloody Mary. Is that a follow-up to the Michael Rosenbaum?
I believe that is part of the Urban Legend franchise series. I guess there's does that mean there's 3 Urban Legend films at least?
Yeah.
But
so he hasn't really directed too much, but a few shorts, and then he did this. This was like his breakout directorial like feature debut, I guess. Yeah. And then he did Krampus like many years later in 2015.
Well, it seems like
and then he's done Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Oh, that was him.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Like, so I guess I've seen. Oh, I haven't seen Godzilla King of the Monsters. Actually, I think I was thinking of Godzilla versus Kong, but well, maybe I should check that one out because I liked Krampus and I liked Trick or Treat. He seems like a guy who really grew up with a lot of '80s horror and tried to keep a lot of that sensibilities alive with his movies, but in maybe a slightly more modern way. But it seems to have a lot of the fun playfulness that you see in a lot of '80s horror.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's largely what I kind of pick up from this movie. The vibe of it is one of the things that I like is that it has those kind of sensibilities.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, he really knows how to have like just really visual atmospheric stuff. It's I would really recommend Krampus for what it is. It's got a little bit more CGI than Trick or Treat, but
we've got to like do an episode on that around the holidays, maybe like in December.
Definitely, yeah.
We'll do one. We'll keep up. We'll do a Krampus watch and record an episode.
But what else can I say about Trick or Treat?
Yeah, I mean, they're mostly said what I want to do. But what do you?
Well, I think I don't know. It's been in maybe development hell for a few years because I've been waiting a while for this apparent Trick or Treat sequel, which is supposedly written and directed by the same man who did the original.
Okay.
I just don't know what the wait is for. I mean, well, I guess there could be film strikes and other things that could be delaying it. But yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential there. I would love to see another sort of Trick or Treat film that's essentially an anthology with a whole bunch of new stories, but maybe include the Sam character in some little way.
It's not the sort of sequel that you would just hate, that you would be like, oh, fuck, they're doing a sequel for this.
Unless they like really just, do a half-ass lazy cheap sequel that that would be sad. But
I mean, just the idea of doing a sequel, right? It's like a lot of movies you're like, oh, really, they're gonna make a sequel? Like, don't even entertain the idea. But with this movie, I could totally see the idea being entertained, and I would hope that it would be good and live up to the first one. But
I'd much rather see a Trick or Treat franchise every other year than a Saw movie every other year. Again, just because it's like there's so much you can do with it, right? Like you could come up with original little mini stories each time, just that they'll be focused around Halloween, which was kind of what they wanted to do with the Halloween franchise. Yeah. Except they kind of screwed themselves over by doing Halloween 2, which is a great movie, but that kind of established it as a Michael Myers thing, and then the third movie, they just kind of did its own. They just made a different Halloween movie.
Yeah, well, and that's where, I mean, even just the fact that it's called Trick or Treat is kind of almost reminiscent of making a movie that's just called Halloween. Yeah. And as I was saying, when the movie first got started and you're sort of seeing the POV thing of the couple over at the house, I was like, this has a bit of a Halloween vibe for sure.
What's another thing I got to compliment that movie for, and I think it's something that you and me both really respect and is kind of lacking, I think, in a lot of movies, is, well, I guess, you got to give it credit to the director and the cinematographer, but just there's some really nice, like, camera movement in the movie, it's not just a whole bunch of, it's hard to kind of explain it when you see it, but there's certain movies where there's just rapid editing and you can kind of tell that it's just disguising what was a kind of sloppy sort of filmmaking technique. Oh yeah. No, I thought this movie looked really well. It was very nicely designed visually. Yeah. And maybe that's why directed. And then that's why I guess I keep sort of thinking of it as almost like a throwback to those old 80s movies when a lot of those movies just, they really had storytellers who knew how to tell a story, and they could linger on a shot and move the camera, as opposed to just we'll make a cut every 2 seconds. Yeah, or we'll shoot the shit out of this scene from every angle conceivable, and then cut it together in a way that makes sense. It's like there's more design, it's more thought through, maybe, or at least you get that sense. Yeah, that's my impression. Yeah, which is done more intentionally. So I, for a first-time filmmaker, I was quite impressed with just the style of it all, because Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
it comes together as a
he seems
pretty
to know what he's
strong movie.
doing. Yeah, he seems to have a strong vision.
Yeah, very much so. Maybe we should. You know what? I ran out of tea. My cup of tea has run empty, so maybe we should take a break. We'll end it on Trick or Treat. We'll just say, I mean, for my part anyway, I would totally recommend checking this movie out. We may have already spoiled a bunch of it, but if you haven't seen it, out of context, you probably won't know what we're talking about anyway. So,
Yeah.
But I would totally recommend watching this movie. I wouldn't have known about it really had you not mentioned it, because I never seem to see it on like lists of, Halloween movies you must check out.
Yeah,
But I think it's a great one, and
it's a shame it's not on those lists because it's perfect for those lists. But
it really is. Yeah.
It's that's a shame with a lot of horror movies, unless it's like a really, really successful film. There's a lot of good movies that kind of get lost in the pile.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Trick or Treat needs a sequel, because unfortunately that's kind of almost the weird way to keep something alive, at least in the horror genre, is once you've got like 4 or 5 sequels behind it, then all of a sudden people are like, oh, of course I know Trick or Treat, right?
Yeah.
But when you're just the one movie, sometimes you get a little bit forgotten.
Yeah, that does kind of go back to what we talked about with franchises and in our slasher episode. We were talking about
full circle, man.
We've come full circle in terms of coming back to this point of like being a franchise has a lot to do with remaining like an iconic intellectual property. But anyway, well, yeah. I want to get some more tea. Let's take a little break, and then we're going to be right back to talk about all the movies that we watched this month.
You know what? You go make that tea. We'll keep recording. I'm just going to talk about Teen Wolf 2 for about 15 minutes straight. No, I'm kidding. Kevin was just giving me this look, just sort of like,
No. Although I'd love to watch Teen Wolf. And we didn't get around to watching American Werewolf in London this year, but hopefully next time.
Yeah.
I know how much you love it. But anyway.
Well, yeah.
We'll be right back. And we are back with our fresh brewed cup of English breakfast tea. A perfect thing for, 2:15 now, because it's early morning, breakfast time. But, yeah.
If you think I was speaking fast before, you ain't heard nothing yet. I'm gonna be going
Well, this tea, it really
rapid
makes me feel like saying a lot of stuff and say it really fast. I don't know. But let's get into our list of movies.
Yeah. So I guess just to go over again, in case, if we didn't make it clear enough earlier, because all the other shows we did, it was a very specific sort of genre themes of horror. And we're not doing that with this last show. We decided rather than to focus on a genre, we just thought we would talk about all of the recent horror movies that we had seen in the month of October leading up to Halloween. So these are movies that could bounce around all sorts of genres. I mean, as long as they're sort of horror related to some way or another.
Yeah.
And
most of mine are going to be ones that we talked about, because as we were doing our shows, I was like, oh, I should go watch that. I should go check out this. And I actually didn't get to watch as many as I would have liked. A number of them I tried to watch just as I was going off to bed, and then I'd fall asleep and I'd have to watch it the next night, and would watch it over the course of like 3 nights. But for instance, The House on Haunted Hill, which is of course the classic Vincent Price movie, 1959, popped up on Tubi, and I was like, damn, I gotta watch that. Like, it's a classic. I loved the trailer of Vincent Price just coming on, where he's like, my wife has rented a mansion for a party. Whatever, and he goes on and on. Just a nice, great little monologue. But I was really excited to watch that. And I actually watched this movie twice, because I watched it in black and white, and then I watched it in color.
Oh, I didn't know there was a colorized version. I gotta check that out.
They're both on Tubi, and I saw them both side by side, and I was like, I'm just gonna watch them both. But it took me like 3 nights to get through it the first time. Funny enough, because it's only like an hour and 15 minutes or something.
It's just that it feels 3 hours.
Well, no, I just
I'm
kept
definitely
watching
not
it late
a fan
at night,
of the
and
movie,
I kept falling
so
asleep.
Yeah.
Well,
I think you probably enjoyed it more than I did.
I would love to talk about some of the things that I totally get why you don't like it. And there's a lot to be said for the fact that it's in many ways not a great movie. Like, I mean, how ridiculous is it at the end when when that skeleton comes out, and it's just like this feeble skeleton that kind of slowly like walks toward her and barely touches Carol Omart. Carol Omart, I think, is the name of the actress.
Oh, okay. Is she like a known actress? Like, it seems like you know her name.
Well, I looked
like,
it up.
Oh,
I
okay.
looked up who was in the movie. I'm pretty sure that's the name of the actress. But her character, the skeleton just like barely like touches her, and she falls into the vat of acid, and you're just like, well, that's absurd. But then Vincent Price comes out from like behind the curtain, and he's using this ridiculous like puppeteering machine, and you're just like, this is so absurd.
Yeah, well,
it's like the movie kind of is trying to be clever or have these clever twists, but they're not very clever because they're so unbelievably implausible.
So it's a William Castle movie, and I don't know if you've seen many William Castle films. He was kind of like the schlocky Alfred Hitchcock, except his movies were kind of more horror than thrillers, but also his movies were very much geared to kids. Like, even at that time, you know, House on Haunted Hill was kind of meant to be something that even a kid back then could watch. I'm really glad you brought up the skeleton, because the thing about this is actually a thing I like about William Castle movies, is that he was a bit of an innovator. He was doing it purely for exploitation gimmick reasons, but all of his movies usually had some form of a gimmick, and a lot of these gimmicks would be beyond the movie itself. It would be an interactive gimmick in the movie theater. So,
interesting.
Yeah, so he had a movie called The Tingler, and in that movie,
I saw that one on Tubi as well. I didn't get to watch it, but I love how there's he comes up on screen at the beginning of the movie to say, like, you may feel sensations that you've never felt before.
So yeah, the idea is like we've got the movie gives us an idea that we've all got this sort of dormant kind of creature that like lives in our spine, and when you get a shiver down your spine, that's the tingler tingling, and so they'd set up like randomly like 4 or 5 seats in the movie theaters that were actually like slightly electrocuted, not in like a dangerous way, but it would just give you a little, like, you would feel a tingle in your seat. And so again, it was just like a neat thing. I don't want to go long on the tingler, but you brought up the skeleton in House on Haunted Hill, and that was the gimmick for that movie. So I don't know when it was cued. It was probably towards that end when it knocks the girl into the acid, but what would happen is in the movie theater, they would have like on a string, like a fucking skeleton, just like floating through the aisles. And I guess kids would be like, I'm pretty sure they would just laugh and throw popcorn at it. I mean, that was the real reality of it.
You got to appreciate the attempt at trying something like that.
Yeah. So I'll briefly, I wasn't even planning on bringing up this movie, but just because we're talking about House on Haunted Hill and William Castle, there's a movie I think you would actually really enjoy, and it's a Joe Dante movie, which I've probably brought up many times on this podcast.
Oh, you love your Joe Dante.
Well, he's just man, he was like kind of unstoppable in the 80s, and
yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like he's got a great list of credits. I think I'd probably like him a lot too. Well, I mean, I've seen some of his movies.
In some ways, this was like one of his last real classic movies. This was actually going into the early 90s now. And this movie was not a success. You could actually maybe argue that this was maybe because of the results of this movie, it was kind of the beginning of Joe Dante kind of losing maybe a degree of freedom and power in Hollywood. But it's a movie called Matinee, and it's not a horror movie. It's almost like a coming of age drama, but it's set in the 50s, and John Goodman's in it, and John Goodman essentially plays William Castle. They changed the name, but he's this kind of exploitation director who kind of goes town to town with his little drive-in movies, and they have their own little gimmicks to them, and it's essentially a nod to William Castle and that era of kind of as a kid growing up in that time. And so I don't know, I think you'd enjoy it. It's
sounds cool.
It's kind of, it feels, it's got that, and this is the thing I love in general about Joe Dante is most of his movies, especially the ones from the 80s and early 90s, they really have that kind of feel that Spielberg's old movies had.
Yeah.
Especially the ones that were geared for children.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, personally, yeah, I would much rather watch Matinee than probably any of William Castle's actual movies. But yeah, I remember, I think I said it a little bit on our Haunted House show. The thing that irked me a lot with House on Haunted Hill was I didn't like the sort of new age modern looking house itself.
Yeah, right. It is kind of this like Aztec sort of square building, like an Aztec temple or something.
Because the poster, when you see the poster, it's a classic looking haunted house. It's like a gothic old.
I don't know about that actually, because when I paid a little closer to attention, I was like, okay, it is the fortress thing, the Aztec kind of fortress, but I think it's just. But again, there's actually multiple posters too, so it might depend on which poster you're looking at. But I think if you look closer,
the one I'm thinking of, I think there's like I think the skeleton's on the poster. Maybe it's being hung.
Yeah. But I think that the complex on there is actually the house that you see.
All right. Well, you're probably right, because I bet you looked at that poster much more recently than I did. I don't know why I got it in my impression.
Well, it's
that
partially because it's sort of the way that it's drawn. It's drawn to be very dramatic. You know how like if you shoot something from a really wide angle lens,
it distorts?
Yeah. So whatever's closest to the lens looks very large. And then so it appears as though it kind of like slopes up into this peak, kind of like a castle or something, like some sort of tower. But
well, I'm glad it's on a hill. I'll give them at least that credit. It is on a hill, but it's not even really a haunted house. So fuck this movie.
Yeah. I will say, I want to say in defense of this movie though, I think it's got some great dialogue and some great scenes again between Vincent Price particularly and the actress playing his wife, Carol O'Mart, I believe. The first scene that they have together in the bedroom, he's like pointing the champagne bottle at her head, and they just have this great little exchange of dialogue. And I was like, this is like the brilliance of dialogue written in movies back in the day. And you still get some of that today too, I'm sure.
I think we both,
but just nice. Like sometimes people aren't into kind of the clever dialogue that's written, but I think a lot of noir movies have it. There's some really witty lines in like a variety of Bogart movies and stuff like that. Good back and forth exchanges, often especially between an actress and an actor, where there's sort of like some sexual tension there. And in this particular movie, House on Haunted Hill, it's this they're both sort of threatening each other, but also being very playful about it, and almost threatening each other in this loving way, in this way where they're faking affection for one another. And I'm just like, this is great.
Yeah, there's many couples like that in real life. And there's a lot of tongue-in-cheekness. I think if you go into Haunted House, if you go into watching House on Haunted Hill, don't go into it with the idea of like, oh, I'm going to watch a horror movie. Like, really, you should go into it as if you're going to watch a dark comedy. And I think you'd enjoy the movie a lot more with that sort of frame of mind.
But there is like some legitimately freaky stuff in there too. Like again,
I know we both like the kind of the witchy old hag character. That's a great visual. Like,
so there's a few things that I will say about that, because she's, for starters, as the first time they show her and she's just got her hands up and that look on her face.
She looks like a Halloween decoration.
It's terrifying. Yeah, but it's so scary. Like when it just shows her to cut to that close up.
She's blind, right?
Yeah,
and she's got the white eyes.
So I'll say, like, to me, again, this is almost one of the things that's ridiculous about the movie, but that image is really like this terrifying image. When it's revealed, you're just like, what the fuck? This witchy lady, get her off the screen. Get her out of my sight. Just scary looking. And then she just floats away. She kind of hovers away. And it's kind of like absurd as you're watching it, but it's also just so scary looking that you're like, damn. And I think it played better in black and white, actually, to be honest, than in color.
I could see that, yeah.
But what's funny to me about that whole thing is later on, when it's revealed that she's just one of the caretakers, it leaves you with all these questions like, well, for what? Why does she hover around?
Yeah.
And why was she just standing there with her hands up and this freaky ass look on her face? Like,
Well, it almost kind of goes back to when we were talking a little bit about Trick or Treat, where it's like when you kind of look back and you're trying to think about some of the logic, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But
Yeah,
you're like,
no.
oh, I think, it was, they couldn't resist a setup. And
Yeah,
they use it, and then unfortunately, like later, you're like, oh, that doesn't really make sense. But well, whatever, you got me earlier, so
But then there also you have no idea. You don't get to find out what happens to those caretakers afterward. It's like, okay, it's revealed that they're the caretakers, and you're like, okay, so what about it? Like
So she wasn't. Which does that mean that she wasn't even blind? Because how could
no,
you?
she was blind, and he mentions that she's blind.
So she was just a blind caretaker.
Yeah, or she was like the caretaker's wife because it was, there was that butler guy. But it also leaves me wondering because there's the part where the butler like grabs the young woman's he like grabs her from behind and covers her mouth, and he's like, "Get out of here before he kills you," and that isn't really followed up with anything. It's like it's there only to imply that Vincent Price is trying to set them up and kill them.
Yeah.
Only to reveal later on that he's not actually trying to do that. So it's like, why does the caretaker say that? Why does the caretaker think that? I don't know.
Well, and this is when I think it's moments like that where it really shines how it was a movie meant for a child mentality, where maybe a child wouldn't even really ponder these things that much. They would just kind of enjoy the ride, while any adult or people like you and me later on, we see them, we're just like, like it's it doesn't all make sense.
It doesn't need to totally add up, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably enough to say about House on Haunted Hill. I think I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it for some of the just spookiness, the vibe of it.
Has it made any interest?
And a lot of the scenes and dialogue, little moments between actors, I thought it was all very enjoyable. But again, it doesn't totally add up.
Does it make you in any way interested in seeing the 90s remake?
Maybe because that had like Jeffrey Rush.
Yeah, he's the Vincent Price character in that.
No, I'd be curious to check that out, see how it stacks up.
He's probably the closest tie-in to the original movie. Other than that, it kind of goes in a different place. Other than, of course, characters are being paid to spend a night in this mansion. Yeah, but
there was some good moments in there, like when it's revealed that the one lady hung herself. Again, a lot of the plot just does not add up. It's like implausible, but still just good little reveal moments where it's like, yeah, she's hanging from the ceiling, or it's like the one girl finds the head in the box. Stuff like that. I don't know, some good little moments in there. But
yeah, it's been so long since I've seen it. I'll be honest, like a lot of it's been a bit forgotten on me. It's just like I have like little brief flashes of things like the blind hag and the vat of acid and the skeleton. But it's all kind of little blurs for the most part with me in that one.
Okay.
Yeah. I try to block out movies that I don't like.
Well, what's a movie that you watched recently that you liked?
My list was so this weirdly became the month of Australian horror for me, and I don't even think I'll talk about all of them because they weren't all consistently good. But yeah, I just wanted to make note. Yeah, it seems like I saw at least 3 Australian horror movies this year, and it wasn't really or this month. It just wasn't really planned that way. It just kind of turned out that way. But maybe I'll bring up the one that is. I don't know. Maybe it's the most relevant because it's one of the. It's probably the newest movie on my list. Like this was a movie that came out just a little bit kind of before the Halloween season, and it's an Australian movie called Talk to Me. Have you heard about this movie at all?
No.
Okay. Yeah, it was getting some buzz. Like I think it was kind of in like the late summer. I was just kind of hearing some buzz about this horror movie, and as usual, I was a little bit skeptical, but I was like, all right, well, Halloween's coming up, and that's when I kind of decided to check it out. And I was actually a little bit decent. I was surprised. I was like, you know what, this is a fairly original idea, and you don't get a lot of those these days, it seems. And I won't really spoil too much, but I'll tell you the basic premise. And it's one of those movies where, like, you know, it's a bit of a slow burn. You're kind of like, what is this? Like, where's this going? It's one of those movies where kind of like the characters know a lot more than the audience does, but you're waiting for the characters to kind of reveal what's going on. And they're young. They're like essentially teenagers or maybe early 20s, and they kind of bring this girl out to these kind of these kids are kind of partying. And so the party's going to start typically with, you know, kind of like, I don't know, drinking and smoking. And then they pull out this, I guess it would be like an embalmed hand, like an embalmed corpse hand. And it becomes part of like the party games where once you're kind of inebriated, you can hold hands with this embalmed thing. And then I think you say, talk to me. And then you instantly see across from you like a living corpse. And then, or sorry, I don't even think you just have to hold the hand and you'll instantly see it. But then when you say the words "talk to me," it literally instantly possesses you. And so while you're being possessed, all of your friends are like around you in a circle, and they're like filming you on like their iPhones, and you're just like this like demonic possessed character for a bit, and like you're on a timer. Everyone's kind of trying to beat the score. They're like, "Oh, he's been in for 40 seconds. Get him out!" And like they lock him out, and he's just like, and they're kind of like, "Whoa!" And it's almost like part of the kind of drugs and partying is this kind of like mind fuck of like, oh, I was temporarily possessed by some undead person. And then it from that's kind of the premise, but it kind of goes darker and creepier from there. I'm a very hard person to scare, so it's, you know, I didn't really find the movie all that scary, but it was really original, and it was like an intelligent movie. Like, it's not one of those movies where people are just doing really stupid things. And the ending, I thought there was a great little ending to it, where I was just sort of like, you know what, that was a neat little movie. So if there's anything maybe I'm not crazy about, is it's the title. It's such a generic title that could be used of any movie.
Well, isn't that funny how, I mean, it doesn't really indicate the genre or anything, but isn't that also funny how a lot of these movies that can kind of be forgotten are ones that don't have a good title or don't have a memorable, iconic title?
Yeah. I don't know. That's such a big... To me, that's such an important
kind of slip
thing.
Under the radar.
Yeah. Like, I mean, sometimes you can get away with a random title, and that's nothing wrong with a random title too. But just, I don't think I would never want any of my movies to be called "Talk to Me."
Yeah.
Because it's just like, what is it? Is it a drama? Is it a comedy? Is it a high school drama? Like, I certainly wouldn't think horror.
Yeah. If I was to think, if someone was like, "Have you seen Talk to Me?" I would be like, that sounds like a dramatic rom-com. I don't know. I don't know, like fucking Dead Hand would have been a better title. Anything really. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. It's, again, I wasn't blown away by this movie. I stand by, I think 2022 was a very strong year for horror movies, while 2023, especially in the month of October, was kind of lackluster. Yeah, it's a shame. We were talking about for tonight's episode, maybe going and watching Five Nights at Freddy's, the new Exorcist. Yeah. Also, The Haunting at, what's it called?
Haunting in Venice?
Yeah. I think that would have been a decent one to watch, but we just decided not to go see any of them, partially because we're both poor right now. And
I think Trick or Treat was a nice way to kind of end it.
It was awesome. Yeah, no, that was a great one to watch, and as I say, very suitable for the theme. But and we might down the road watch
Five Nights at Freddy's or
Yeah.
The Exorcist Believer.
So the Talk to Me movie, did that come out last year then?
They came out this year.
Oh, okay,
like,
okay. So yeah,
probably just like a few months ago.
It's nice to know that was a a pretty decent movie that's like a modern movie too, because it's nice to find those ones that are new, they're modern,
Yeah.
and they're still holding up.
And an Australian movie, which again, like I'm definitely starting to see more Australian films, but it's just nice to see just something from a different place where there's I don't know, they've just got like a little bit of a different outlook on things, like I feel like if this wasn't made in Australia, I don't know, something would have been different about this film and probably not in its in a positive way. Like this was clearly an indie film that probably they weren't censored or limited by much.
Every part of the world, I think, has its own culture and its own influences that inevitably end up coming across in the work. So that's one reason why it's really quite interesting to explore foreign cinema from all different parts of the world, as you find interesting stuff, because there are different influences and it is a different culture.
And I like that they were able to incorporate like the technology of like the cell phones, and not in a creepy like, oh, you held that hand and now a creepy voice called you. It was more just the realistic thing of, I think that's kind of I think that's what young kids would do in real life if they were involved with this embalmed hand that was possessing them. They would just be like, hey man, let's film it and see if we can beat that score of
let's see how many YouTube views we can get.
And just kind of treating this thing as like nothing serious at all, like when it's like maybe there's some real danger to letting these things possess you, right? But yeah, no, it was a neat one, and more than anything else, I got to just give it props for being an original idea. You know?
Yeah, totally. Well, I have a few more on my list, but I'm going to kind of brush over a few of these because we did talk about them quite a bit in other episodes. So this month I also watched The Witches. I watched Monster Squad. We've talked about both of those. I rewatched Casper just to kind of have some lighthearted thing to kind of get a familiar with it again. And
how was your rewatching of Casper?
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, like it was kind of nostalgic. I don't think it's like, if it disappeared off the face of the earth, I wouldn't be that upset. But it was a fun little rewatch. I won't talk too much about it, but yeah, it was fine. Like I'd give it a 6, I guess, a 6 out of 10.
I think that's fair.
A little better than mediocre, but and the 90s nostalgia is great.
Yeah.
Let's see, but one that I could talk a little bit about is one that I know you love, Nosferatu, and I was telling you how like I fell asleep watching this several times. Which
I
actually still haven't gotten through the whole thing.
So the funny thing is, the first time I saw Nosferatu...
By the way, we're talking about the Nosferatu that...
1979 Werner Herzog. It's the remake, I guess, one. Not the old silent film from the black and white era.
Yeah.
Which is, ironically, probably less likely to put you to sleep, even though it's silent and black and white. It's shorter and it's a little bit more fast paced. I'm going to be honest. I don't think I saw the movie all in one. I think I fell asleep probably 2 or 3 times while watching it. It's almost like a rite of passage, I think.
Yeah. Well, you were saying like it's one of those films that does kind of hypnotize you a little bit, and it's like you just sort of slip into this like into the story and what's kind of going on. I don't even want to say story, but just the experience in a way. You kind of sink into the world and get comfortable there, and it's there's not a lot of like at least in all the stuff that I watched, there's not a lot that really like jumps out and scares you or anything. It's more so just like this haunting ambience of being in the castle and being in that place with this creepy man who's there with his fingernails and his weird ass look.
Yeah. I think the thing that's like maybe what's very creepy about it is that it feels like a very realistic Dracula movie. Like there's nothing about it that seems phony. It's almost like the lack of excitement gives it almost like a documentary feel. Like you're there.
That makes a lot of sense because I mean Werner Herzog is quite a bit of a documentarian. Hey, like that's almost kind of his style. He's
got this fascinating technique where he actually creates a lot of weird how would I say this properly? So when he makes a documentary, he'll actually create a lot of sort of fake staged elements to make the documentary more interesting. And when he makes his movies, he will often shoot like documentary like sequences that are essentially very real, that he will insert into his fictional movies. So what I'm trying to say is like he will capture real life documentary moments in his fictional films and insert those, while when he's making his documentaries, he will stage phony scenarios and put them in. So it's almost like...
Yeah, he kind of treads the line there a little bit.
Yeah, like his documentaries aren't truly fully documentary and his movies aren't fully fictional films. They both kind of overlap in these ways. And I think when it came to Nosferatu was his first and I'm pretty sure his last horror movie that he ever made. And I don't think he was ever even intending to be like, I want to make a horror film. I think it was more of an idea of he came in this new wave of German filmmakers, and it was just kind of like a challenge to take one of the most oldest classic German films and just have his own take on it. And I think that's kind of more why he wanted to do it as opposed to wanting to make a horror movie. It was more that he wanted to take a stab at remaking what was probably considered such a classic German film that you couldn't do justice to remake it. And I think that was more of what appealed to him as opposed to him being like, I want to terrify the audiences unlike ever before. Yeah. I don't feel that was really his goal and why he probably never went to make more horror movies after that. It was more like he was just maybe like, oh, if anyone's going to attempt to make a Nosferatu remake, it should be me.
I gotcha.
But I remember when we were talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I remember you were saying about how, you kind of had a hard time following the story. And the only reason why I think it's not that hard for me to follow the story is that when you watch enough Dracula films, you do start to eventually see the parallels in the story. Right.
Sort of there's a pattern, or there's certain things that keep popping up again and again.
Yeah. But with that being said, he definitely took some liberties with that movie, and there's some stuff in his Nosferatu that I don't think is in any of the other Dracula adaptations too.
Yeah. There was somebody who actually made a comment on one of our videos who was saying of Dracula, it's like the whole aspect of when you watch it multiple times and you're picking up on different elements that are going on each time, it's like it makes it like a new experience every time you're watching it. And that is kind of the way that I feel. Is it's like every time I watch Dracula, it's like it feels like I'm watching it again for the first time because I've forgotten things. And so it's like you're paying attention to different things that are going on every time. You're watching it like from a new perspective every time. And that's, I don't know, it's an interesting sort of movie. I don't exactly know what creates that experience, but it's like, yeah, it's not really a story that, for me, that I remember, the step-by-step plot.
Well, one thing that was impressive about the Bram Stoker one is that even though Coppola took some liberties even with that, there's a lot of characters in that movie. Like most other Dracula movies, they will and I guess in general with a lot of movies, they will oftentimes take two characters and then just combine them into one person.
Oh yeah.
But they don't do that for the Bram Stoker one, or at least they don't do it nearly as much. Like it's the only one I can think of where, like they show all of Lucy's what would be the I'm trying to find like the right word for it, not like her possible mates. There's about 3 different men who are all going for the affection of Lucy, and pretty much all the other Dracula movies, it's like Lucy's got one guy.
Oh, okay.
And that's it. But they're like, nope. In the book, she's got 3 suitors. That's what I was trying to remember.
Okay.
She has 3 suitors, and yeah, like they all play pretty kind of key moments in the movie. But I think maybe for somebody who, if that's their introduction to the Dracula story, it could be a little bit overwhelming or confusing just to have all of these characters in a movie that's, you know, essentially supposed to be kind of focused on Dracula. So that could, again, also be another thing that kind of makes the plot a bit like, you know, a little bit complex, I find. Because those are the parts where I watch the movie where, again, I especially forget a lot of those moments. And I'm kind of like, oh, right, yeah, there's all these kind of sort of side stories to a degree. But yeah, as for Nosferatu, but you did eventually finish it? Did you eventually get to the, oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I didn't say anything about the ending, because the ending the ending is has got an interesting spin on it that is unlike the other Dracula films that I've seen, but I won't say what that is.
I'm looking forward to that. I'll maybe even get around to watching it tomorrow. Who knows?
Yeah.
Tomorrow night or something. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't blame you though for falling asleep. Like that thing's put me to sleep many times. I think the problem is also is like I always watch it like late at night, and then I'm like, fuck, I'm already tired.
I know.
Yeah.
What else have you got on your list?
So, I mean, I've got a lot of stuff on my list, and I'm kind of like you. A lot of these I want to sort of pass over.
Yeah. Run through some of them. You could just mention a few of them. Like I'm gonna.
Well, maybe I should. There's one in particular that I would actually really like to talk about. Maybe I should.
Okay. Well,
talk about that one, or should I save that for maybe a little bit more towards the end? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, sure. Talk about that one, and maybe for the ones you want to brush over, just mention them quickly so we know what you watched. A
lot of I've seen a lot of horror movies, and at this point, it becomes more of a struggle every Halloween. I'm kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel of movies to see, and so it becomes more and more kind of older movies or foreign movies, because that's kind of an area that I can still kind of find stuff in. And there was really only one movie on my list of things that I watched, which was a movie that I had been wanting to see for some time and was kind of really looking forward to seeing it. And it's a French film called Inside. And this was part of the French extreme movement that kind of went on I guess it technically started in the late 90s, but it was really the early, it was really kind of 2000 to 2010 where this movement was happening. And there wasn't tons of movies, but it was almost like once a year there was at least one kind of standout French film that was just really extreme, and it was either be an extreme kind of horror movie or maybe like a really extreme kind of sexual movie, or sometimes it would kind of be combined. It's like a sexual horror movie.
Hey, that's a subgenre. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. And I'd seen some of these other movies I had seen of this era would be a movie. One of them was called High Tension. There was another one called Martyrs. But the one that I had never gotten around to seeing that was kind of one of the big ones was a movie called Inside. And I think I partly maybe just waited a while because even just the premise just seemed very intense. And the premise is basically a woman who's, she's 9 months pregnant. She's about to, pop and give birth any moment now. And I didn't know it was also set on Christmas Eve. So I was just like, it's almost like
it's a Christmas film,
in some ways, yeah. And then...
a fun holiday Christmas film for the whole family about a pregnant woman who gives birth.
Oh, God. If you ever show this movie to a family or anybody with kids, like, you should be...
It's the birth of Jesus.
Who know? It could. You know what, man?
Maybe that was part of. Maybe that was something they were trying to get at? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah,
like,
well, I mean, because the thing is, it's like, yeah, like, well, what's the significance of having it on Christmas Eve? You know, other than to just make it a juxtaposition of a lighthearted, like a wonderful holiday, a happy holiday with a horrible thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically the movie starts with the woman's pregnant from the beginning, but the movie actually starts with like a brutal car accident where I think she loses her husband, who would be the father of the child, and she miraculously survives, and so does the baby. So like right from the beginning, she's like, oh my God, I've almost lost this thing. And then the rest of the movie more or less kind of takes place in her, I don't know if she's in a house or an apartment building. I think it's a house, but for whatever reason, there's like this like figure outside of her house who's trying to like break in, and it's this like crazy woman who essentially her whole purpose is she wants to steal this woman's unborn baby and essentially cut it open with scissors. Like that's kind of where things are kind of like leading towards. And meanwhile, like other people kind of come into the house, and the crazy woman gets in and she attacks the other people. And I won't spoil too much, but my God, I've seen a lot of gory movies, but this one, the gore is like very realistic. And also just, they were smart in that, in some ways I can't relate, you know, I'm not a woman. I'm never going to know what it's like to be pregnant, but
no, Oliver, this day
I knew it.
you can.
I knew it. You were going to go there. Okay. You're right, Kevin. I'm sorry. I had a bigot moment, but yeah, there was something really smart about, there's not a lot of movies that kind of do the premise where the main character is a 9-month pregnant woman. And, you know, it's like, I think it's already a winning combination to have like the main heroine in a horror movie, a woman, because there's already a lot of vulnerability there. But then to make them 9 months pregnant, it's just, you know, you're dealing with a woman who's already maybe in the most vulnerable position in her life, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, there's like a part in the movie where like her water breaks and she's just like, oh, okay, am I going to like just give birth now while this woman's like on the other end of this door trying to like kill me, you know?
Wow.
And you're like, you know, it would already be a stressful enough situation to just give birth by yourself in a house without medical assistance.
Yeah.
But to do it while a woman is attacking, you know, like the girl's like bleeding and stuff because she's being attacked by this woman, and she's trying everything to, and her whole goal is like, you know, like I survived that car crash. All I care about is saving this baby of mine, you know? And just, yeah, I don't know. The movie really got to me. And then the ending, it's like, I'm telling you, man, if you have a really good, even if you have a kind of a not great horror movie, if you have a great ending, that could be enough to win me over with it being a good movie.
Yeah.
But this movie was great the whole way through. Like I was on edge the whole time. And then it ended with an ending where I was like, it didn't go too over the top, but it was great and disturbing.
And you said I don't think you mentioned this yet, but it's a French film, right?
It's a French movie.
Did you mention that already?
I think when I was talking about like the French extreme movement, like at the very beginning, but I haven't talked about it since I first brought it up.
And so it's in French, I take it too. Hey, subtitles? Or
yeah,
did you watch
it's subtitles. Well, the nice thing is with a lot of, I think with a lot of these sort of movies where they know that they'll have a global market, they kind of are smart enough to not make a movie filled with dialogue, especially in horror movies in general. There's a lot of non-speaking, and even in English movies, there's a lot of just moments of just visual tension. And so there's a lot of that in this movie. It's not an overly talky movie. But if there's actually, I do got to say, if there's one major flaw that this movie has, is that the movie was made in 2007, and I don't know what its budget was, but there's a number of times where they decide to go into the, like, not the POV of the unborn baby, but there's just moments where you just, like, the shots go inside the womb where you see, like, the baby kind of just being, like, bounced around inside, and it's terrible CGI. Oh. And it's the only, and it was really unnecessary. There was no reason you needed to see the baby. I think there was a couple moments where they wanted to give the impression that, oh, even the baby kind of got a bit hurt inside, but you didn't. If it was really good CGI, then it would have been fine, I guess. But because the CGI was bad, it really just stands out. You're just like, oh, here's like a cartoon baby in this otherwise really realistic movie. Yeah. So that's the only thing that kind of took me out of it a little bit. That's the only real flaw I would say about this film.
Maybe you can do a fan edit where you just cut those bits out. And
I'll insert some of the clips from the Butterfly Effect or something. Oh man, I don't know. Did you ever see that movie?
I did. I don't remember what you're talking about because I watched it once, but a while ago now.
Technically, what I'm actually talking about is it's the alternate ending of the Butterfly Effect, where he decides to. He's like, "Fuck! I keep going back in time, and I keep fucking up things worse." So he eventually goes back to when he hasn't been born, and he strangles himself with his own umbilical cord.
Oh.
And you're just like, what? But
so that was not the way that the movie actually.
No, I think that was probably the original ending, and the studios were like,
"Yeah,
you gotta change that." Weirdly enough, I almost might prefer it though in a weird way. It's a darker ending.
Yeah,
but again, it's not even about the visual.
Well, and maybe borderline on the absurd too, because it's like what baby can be in the womb and consciously be like, I want to commit suicide inside.
Yeah,
the womb.
like it's a baby with like 23 years worth of memories. You're like, so if that baby was just born, would he just be an instant genius? Like it's I don't want to go on Butterfly Effect, but but Inside, Inside was the one that like of all of the movies I saw, it like kind of like shook me the most. It was like the one true like, okay, at least I got one real gruesome, intense movie.
Yeah, well, you are making me want to watch it.
It's worth watching. Yeah. Also, Martyrs, which I said earlier as one of the other French extreme movies.
Was that another one you watched this month?
No, I'd seen that movie years ago, and it fucked me up. And
yeah, that's something I'd like to watch.
I'll put it this way:
give myself some voluntary
Martyrs.
trauma.
That's how you do torture porn right. That's all I'll say about that movie. But it's like the thinking man's torture porn film. And Martyrs and I think Inside, those are my two favorites from that French extreme movement that happened in that period. And I don't know. Yeah, I can't believe I waited so long on it. I think I was just... It was the idea of just, a pregnant woman being attacked by another woman with like a pair of scissors. I was just kind of like, I don't know if I'm in the mood to watch that.
Yeah, you have.
And so I just delayed it. Yeah.
Go through the right ritual to get yourself ready for that one. Hey?
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm glad I saw it. I don't know if I'll watch it again anytime soon, but yeah, no, if you want something like really kind of, I mean, again, this is coming from a guy who's seen, almost 1,000 horror movies, and yeah, this one there were times where I kind of wanted to cover my eyes. So
well, that says a lot.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what I should talk about next. I watched I watched The Haunted Mansion. That was the Eddie Murphy version. Again, kind of like Casper. It was just a fun movie to watch. I like Eddie Murphy. I think he's very entertaining. And it was just a lighthearted movie, but
do you think I would like it? Should I haven't seen The Haunted Mansion. Should I
I wouldn't go out of my way to do it, really. If you're looking for something to not really be too have to pay attention too much to, it's
Yeah.
Again, kind of sits maybe in like that 5-6 territory. 5 or 6 out of 10. That's not a bad ranking for me, by the way. Like, I consider a 5 to be like middle of the road, right? So it's not like a 5 is a terrible movie. It's just it's average. It's mediocre.
Yeah. And it's, to me, a 6 that works out to 3 out of 5 stars. That's certainly not bad.
So it's like a 6 would be, it's entertaining or whatever. But so there was that one. Again, I kind of watched it more so for I almost feel like I'd like the Muppets Haunted Mansion more because
I think I would too.
I just enjoy Muppets, man. Did you see the funny thing that I posted today, by the way? I saw this, I guess it was probably some AI concept art, but it was the Muppets Shining. And it was like if they did a Muppets rendition of The Shining. So they had like Kermit poking his head through the crack in the door with an axe and everything, and they had a couple of the other guys, can't remember which ones, were like the little girls in the hallway, And the hilarious one was they had like Fozzie Bear as that guy sucking the priest's dick or whatever in the room.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's hilarious. But it's
Okay, I'm on to you.
just the concept of making like taking a really serious movie like The Shining and doing it with the Muppets, I think is hysterically funny.
Well, I appreciate the plug.
Yeah.
But it wasn't Kermit breaking through the door. It was Animal.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you watched that, but yeah.
Watch what?
The Muppets Shining.
No, it doesn't actually exist.
Wait, what?
It was a concept movie.
Well,
Like,
yeah.
I don't. I'm pretty sure they didn't make it. It was like.
Well, it's not a feature length, but it's a short. Wait,
Is it?
I don't know if you're messing with me right now.
No,
or
I mean
not.
I'm being serious right now. So this is hilarious. Okay, I'm being serious. There was I was scrolling through Instagram and I came across a post which I think was, as I say, like AI concept art, just as a joke, right? It was
Right.
like, here's what the Muppets version of The Shining would be like, right? But I don't think it's a real movie or a short or anything. It was just a bunch of still images, right?
Okay, so this is what's really bizarre.
Okay.
So I posted literally today a fan edit film I made called The Muppets Take the Overlook.
Oh, what?
And
really?
I
I didn't see that.
Okay, because you were like verbatim describing.
Oh my gosh!
Not only
really?
that, well, I want to at least hope that, because I
That's
also
hilarious. So you totally thought I
Well-
was just like joking along with your joke.
I literally was like, oh, you're plugging my video, which I literally posted today. Well, I guess I technically posted it yesterday, which was October 30th. I also posted a poster of the Muppet Shining thing like a few days ago.
Holy shit!
And
Okay, I'm
not
looking at
sure
it
if
right
that-
now. I missed this. I didn't
Okay.
see this before,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's hilarious. You had the same ideas, whoever this person was, but
Well, now I'm like, I'm freaking out. I'm like, I gotta like see if this person actually made a video like what I made or something, and see if
okay. Well, I'm gonna go.
Maybe
I'm,
theirs
I'm
are
gonna
just
send
photos,
this
but
thing to you just so that you.
this is bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I'm
Yeah.
gonna send this thing to you just so you have a reference.
Well, I wasn't gonna plug it, but I guess now that we've got into it, yeah, like I made a Muppet Shining fan film. Like
you should
I was
post
working
that-
on
you
this
should
throughout
post
the
that-
whole month.
Oh, you should totally post that tomorrow to our Movies with the Mooks
I should,
channel.
yeah. I guess we were talking earlier today, and maybe I didn't finish my sentence, which was I was like, this somehow became the Halloween of The Shining for me because I was editing our Shining segment that I posted
Yeah,
recently, and while I was at the same time, I was doing my Muppet Shining video.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just sort of like, oh God, I've just been doing nothing but Shining stuff this
Yeah,
whole time. But yeah, no, it's okay. After we do this podcast and we're all done, you should watch my Muppet video.
Okay,
it's like
I will.
it's like 6 minutes long, and it's honestly
hilarious. It sounds great.
Yeah, I wasn't even. I didn't really know what to do with it. Like it's literally just think of the highlights of the movie The Shining,
Yeah.
and I just replace it with Muppets. It's nothing more than that.
That's essentially what this series of still images was. But again, yours is a video. That's pretty cool.
Wow, I wonder if I'm going to get accused of ripping off this guy though, who maybe made some
know.
stills, because that's
Or maybe you can accuse him of ripping you off.
it's all about that timestamp of like who came up with it first.
Yeah, right.
But that's funny. I'm glad. It sounds like it's a little bit different. Like I hope he does use Kermit as the main character because I.
Yeah.
But see, yeah, when you even said Fozzie Bear is sucking the dick, I literally created that sequence in my video. That was actually a sequence I made like years. That was what spawned this whole thing. Was I made just a little sequence of just Fozzie Bear and Kermit in that sequence, and then years later I was like, you know what? Why don't I just make more of this? So maybe that person saw my Fozzie Bear video from years ago and they ripped me off.
Maybe.
I don't know. This is I don't know. We got to get back to the movies, but afterwards we will talk about this.
Okay. Well, let me kind of brush over because I wanted to just like kind of brush over some of these. Let me see. I'll quickly talk about the when we did our animation segment. I went and watched The Mascot, which I thought was really impressive. I was like blown away by how just involving that stop motion was. I was like, wow, given that this is 1933, like super impressed.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was very cool. And I definitely, again, it's so cool that you can just look this stuff up on YouTube. That was great. I watched Vincent, which I had actually seen before, but I kind of got a re-watch of it. And that was Tim Burton's little stop motion movie there. Good one. And then I actually went and watched the original Frankenweenie as well.
Yeah.
Which was, you know what's great about that? And that's like quite an impressive little short film, is it's got a lot of like Tim Burton style there in terms of you're starting to see how he, how would I say it? Kind of how he, the lens through which he sees the world, you know, the fact that this kid is, you know, how he shows him cobbling together this machine to resurrect his dog from all these different parts. He's got like a bicycle and this antenna thing or whatever, and it's connected like through these cables that he's got hooked up to his dog and stuff. And there was a lot of, I didn't realize all the notable cameos that were going to be in there, but it's got the kid from the Neverending Story and number of other people. Who is that?
It's got Shelley Duvall is the mom.
Shelley Duvall. Who's the guy? The guy who plays the dad?
That's Daniel Stern.
Right, Daniel Stern. The guy who played Marv in Home Alone, for those of you who don't know. That's where I know of him from.
Yeah.
Mainly.
He was the narrator of the Wonder Years. Well, it was supposed to be, I guess he was the adult version of Fred Savage in the Wonder Years. And so his voice was very iconic through that series. And he's been in a number of things.
Yeah.
And
you mentioned Sofia Coppola is in the movie.
Yeah, she's one of the friends. Actually, there's a boy who's one of the friends, and he actually ends up being the older brother in the Wonder Years. So weirdly, there's two Wonder Years cast members in Frankenweenie. But that's the boy who is also the bully in the Monster Squad.
Oh yeah.
He's in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. He's got a small cameo in Back to the Future. But he was in a bunch of stuff back in that day. And it's funny, like with Frankenweenie, I'm like really curious, like what Tim Burton's budget was, and also how much time they had to shoot that movie.
Yeah. Well, it's got some great visuals as well, like where he's up on the hill and he's about to dig up his dog and stuff. And I'm just like, wow, this is like, it's what's so cool about it is it's like, this is low budget Tim Burton style. This is him doing what he can with a limited budget, which fits his visionary kind of, look on life, the way that he sees the world, you know?
Well, and it shows how important a director really can be to a project if that director has a unique vision.
Yeah, totally. It's got so much style. And,
well, and it just shows that it like that style wasn't a fluke. It wasn't an accidental thing. Like this was something that was truly
very intentional.
Tim Burton's, and
deliberate.
And you see it right from the beginning, you know? The only thing that would have made it more Tim Burton-y would have been a Danny Elfman score. But even with that being said, I don't mind the score, like just because the score is what it is, and it doesn't really take away. It's just more of a Spielberg score than a Tim Burton score, I find.
Yeah, that's probably a good way of putting it.
But yeah, no. Also, I think if you were to back in the day, like you could actually rent Frankenweenie in video stores, but because it was half an hour, they kind of wanted to expand it a little bit. So I think if you were ever to rent Frankenweenie back in the day, it almost always came with Vincent. Like Vincent would be the short.
So that's why
before,
they tend to go hand in hand or whatever.
Yeah,
makes sense.
So it's kind of cool that you watched both of those.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of get the reference and. But I'm really glad I watched it. It's actually quite entertaining and watchable. A lot of those early movies can be a bit hard to get through, but I think Frankenweenie is quite fascinating to see. Yeah. So anyway, what's next on your list there?
So here's another one I'll bring up because if we have time, I'll go into the crummier movies I saw, but I really want to focus on the ones that had an impact on me.
We don't have a ton of time. I mean, we're at an hour and 45 minutes.
Oh, so boy. Okay. So the one title I wanted to bring up was a movie called The House That Screamed, and it's a shame because I watched this movie just after we had done our slasher episode and our gothic episode, and this is basically a gothic slasher movie. And
Damn.
I was just like,
Just
man,
missed the boat.
yeah. And I had like really like no expectations for this. Like I must have just heard, like somebody must have recommended it, and I put it on my list, and I decided to give it a chance. And so it's a slasher movie from like the 60s, and these old slasher movies from the 60s, like they're just really classy because the slasher genre didn't even really fully exist yet, at least not as a term, I feel. So they're really different. Like this movie doesn't even have a high body count. Like there's really only 3 murders in the movie, but it takes place in this like all girls boarding school in like the 1800s, and just everything's just really beautiful. It's you feel like you're watching like The Sound of Music until like bodies start getting killed. And the thing that's also creepy about it is that like they're actually like fairly young girls. Like they're these like attractive young women, but you can tell like they're probably actually teenagers. So when you
Are
see,
they supposed to be plain women?
no, they're student. They're teenagers playing students.
Oh, okay. I
Maybe
thought you meant like they're teenagers playing like, I don't know, women in their 20s or 30s.
No, it's like a boarding school, and
Okay.
and they're probably supposed to be 14 to 17 maybe or something. And it's also just got this great twist ending that I was surprised. I was just like, wow, like that's where they took this. Cause when I was watching the movie, I was like the first murder, it takes so long. I was even thinking, I'm like, is this actually a slasher movie? Cause what the hell's going on here? Like it's almost like a drama for the first bit. And then another neat thing I guess I would say about this is, so this is also this is another foreign film, but it's in English. In fact, it's a Spanish movie, and this was the very first all English speaking Spanish film that was ever made.
Interesting.
And when you watch it, like
When was it made then?
1969.
Okay.
And what was I gonna say? Kind of blanking out there for a second. You could tell like the movie's dubbed. Like it was kind of made the way Italian films were made, where they don't really record audio, and then like they'll record
I
it,
see.
then they'll have it afterwards. But with this movie, like as opposed to recording it in multiple languages, it's in English. Like and the characters like you can tell they're dubbed, but you can at least see that their mouth is matching the words.
Yeah,
they probably
gotcha,
just had
gotcha. A lot
thick
of ADR
accents.
and
Yeah, exactly. But it's got an ending where I was just like, holy shit, for like this classy old 1960s movie, it had like a real nice twist ending where I'm just like, okay, this movie's a classic as far as I'm concerned. But I just loved it mainly for when we were having our Gothic episode, we were just talking about all the things that we love about the Gothic look.
Yeah.
And that's what I just liked about this movie. I'm just like, oh man, like, yeah, just everything's classy. Like even like the headmistress who runs the place, like she's kind of this like classy broad too. And you're kind of just like, okay, where's this gonna go basically? Because it's the older slashers, like it's not like a guy in a mask. It's usually just like a leather gloved killer that you don't really see anything other than their hands. So you're like, it could be anybody. But I just really, this one was just like a real surprise. Like this is why I still go out and watch these obscure horror movies, because every now and then you do discover a gem.
Well, it sounds like you found quite a few good ones this month. I mean, every movie that you've really talked about so far has gotten me intrigued, and sounds like you were pretty impressed by.
Well, I saw some shit too, but I'm not going to go into those ones.
Well, again, you can just mention the titles or whatever. Maybe,
sure.
but.
Yeah. Do you want me to say them now, or did you have another title or so you wanted to get into?
Yeah, sure, I could. Well, why don't you brush over a few of yours, and I'll decide which one I want to talk about next.
Okay. So I saw one. Well, okay. Which one do I want to really talk about? Do I want to talk about Jason X?
No, I'm saying brush over the ones that.
Okay.
Give us the titles of the ones you don't want to talk about, and then I'll talk about mine.
Okay, so here's a couple kind of ones that were shit. I finally saw Jason X.
Okay.
Fucking.
So it was
don't bring your Jason movies to Canada. Like we make the worst Jason movies. Okay, it's not
shot in Canada again.
It's Jason in space. That's the
Right,
Jason X one, and it's not as bad as Jason Goes to Hell. At least Jason is in this movie, but holy fuck. Man, it's the only thing I liked was like the very end, which kind of gave me a chuckle, but everything else, man, this movie was painful. There was a movie I saw called Rituals. It was kind of like a low budget Canadian ripoff of Deliverance. It was okay, actually. It almost kind of had like that Texas Chainsaw vibe where the low budgetness kind of gave it this documentary feel that almost made it a little bit creepier than maybe it would have if it was more polished. And the acting was actually pretty good. It was all like these like kind of like older actors, and like they're kind of 50s, and some of them I recognized and stuff. And I was just sort of like, oh, okay, like this kind of adds some credibility to the movie, but it's also just in almost every way an inferior version of Deliverance. But that was another one I saw. That was a little Canadian horror movie.
So of course we watched The Lost Boys.
Oh yeah,
the other night at your place. That was about a week ago or whatever now. And so I had seen segments of this, but I'd never seen the whole thing from beginning to end. I'd seen a few scenes here and there on TV sometime. I can't remember when. It must have been back in like 2012, 2011 or something. But the big thing that always stuck out to me in my mind was that song, the Cry Little Sister, which I think is a great song.
Yeah.
And when I first heard it all those years ago, I downloaded the song and I listened to it all the time. And so I'd always think of like, oh yeah, Lost Boys. That's that movie that had this song, super cool 80s movie that I really got to get around to watching at some point. So I'm really glad that we got a chance to sit down and watch it because I quite loved it. I mean, it's that like dark 80s movie period. Like it reminds me a lot of The Crow for some reason.
I know.
In a lot
I
of
can
ways.
see what you mean. It's very just that stylized.
Yep.
Like in many ways, it's
a dark movie,
Yep.
so it's kind of a lot of it takes place at night, and let's see.
I love the house that they live in, like the grandfather's house, like this kind of like big wooden kind of cabin in the middle of nowhere. I'm just sort of like, yeah, I don't know, like. If I had a grandparent with that kind of a house, I'd want to visit all the time. I feel.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't want to live there, but yeah, no. I thought that was like a real neat. It's one of those things where you're almost like, was that a real house, or did they build that for the movie? Because they kind of destroy it. Yeah,
I'm guessing it was a set, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like the movie, and I love seeing all these guys in their early years too. Like Kiefer Sutherland comes out, and he's got that crazy blonde side of his head shaved mullet that he has going on with his piercings, his earrings and stuff, and he's very like this standout sort of character. And all those vampires really kind of are. They got their like long hair, and I don't know, they're just very striking, cruising around on their dirt bikes. I don't know what was up with that in the 80s. That must have been a thing, because I think they do that a lot in The Karate Kid too. They're always zipping around on their dirt bikes. Hey?
Yeah.
But the music, the vibe. They go to that lair. I think that vampire lair that they had was really cool.
Really cool one. Yeah.
What a great set.
It's like there's sequences in there, like when Michael's drinking. He's getting initiated in. He's drinking the bottle of blood, and
and he's hallucinating or whatever.
And there's moments there. Like there's a lot of. I noticed this a lot, especially when we had watched Lost Boys together. There's a lot of these sort of like cross-fading transitions, and it makes it especially when they're like the vampire cave layer, where you're just sort of like, man, this is like, it's like I'm watching like one of like the great 80s like music videos right now. Like I mean, they kind of look like a band already, but I think the thing that's like really unique to talk about with Lost Boys is that, since that movie, modern vampire films are like a dime a dozen. It's almost probably it's not the exception to the rule. It's now like the rule to make modern vampire movies. But at that time, it was a lot more unique. The only other movie before Lost Boys that was a modern take would be a movie called The Hunger. But that movie was not nearly the success that Lost Boys was. Like Lost Boys was, the real like MTV modern vampire movie that just a lot of people latched onto. Near Dark came out that same year, which is also compared a lot to it because they're both modern vampire movies. But that wasn't really like, it was a really new thing at that time, you know, like now with Twilight and all these other things, it's just kind of like, all right. But back then that was like an extreme, like the look of those guys and that being what a vampire was like kind of like an extreme new take.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also seemed to be like one of like the first movies I can think of that kind of had that sort of subtle makeup effect that you later saw a lot in like the Buffy TV show and a lot of later movies where they just have that kind of latex kind of brow ridge.
Oh, okay.
That kind of makes them look a lot meaner when they're like in their vampire makeup.
Yeah.
And you see that kind of style in, well, again, even like Bram Stoker's Dracula like has a little bit of that stuff. And but then, yeah, you just started seeing that like in a lot of things later on. But I think probably at that time, that was probably like audiences at that time were probably like, whoa, like these are that's a freaky vampire look, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's worth noting when that sort of thing is new and fresh for the time period that it came out. Because eventually you start to get used to it and other movies take reference from it and try to recreate it. And you start to think, oh, it's just, you know, the way that they've always done things. But be aware of what originated it or where it kind of was first, a novel concept is.
And another set piece from that movie I really dig a lot. It's just one scene, but it's when the vampires bring Michael out to witness their first like kill where they're killing all the rockers by the fire and they're all hanging out in that tree. They're just like in the branches kind of looking down, like they're kind of backlit and then afterwards, like, you know, they're up on the hill telling Michael, you know, what he is and what they are. And again, to me, that's just like another just very iconic scene in the movie. There's a lot of that. I also love Diane Wiest, or is it Diane Wiest or Diane West? But, you know, she's just like a great movie mom.
Yeah. She totally is. As we were saying, she's always, she can't like not be super sweet. She's very enjoyable to watch in that way. Just super nurturing and likable.
It's funny, just earlier today, I was like reading an article about the young actress in the movie, Star, played by Jamie Gertz.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Apparently, she is the wealthiest Hollywood actress, possibly. That was what the article was basically saying, was like, or what's the word? When they kind of like put your I don't know, money value to your name, but I think
your net worth.
Your net worth, I think, but I don't know if this would count. But it's just, I guess it's based on like I guess she married some really successful billionaire who's maybe one of the richest men in the world. Because that's the only way I could imagine that she's now like the most wealthiest actress.
Yeah,
but it's not because of her career.
Well, that was sort of like what's her name? Julia Louis-Dreyfus is like a billionaire,
right?
Because of some inheritance or whatever.
Yeah, way before Seinfeld was ever a thing.
Yeah, and it's hilarious, right? It's like she's richer than Jerry. But you think of Jerry as the guy who really got, you know, the majority of the success off that. But
it's famous. Well, the fact that you brought up Seinfeld, Jamie Gertz from Lost Boys is in an episode of Seinfeld.
Oh,
and it's an episode with Elaine where she's in the bathroom and Elaine has run out of toilet paper.
Oh fuck, I know that episode.
And Jamie Gertz can't can't spare a square, and she is the richest actress in the world who can't spare a square.
That's so funny that's her, because that's one of the episodes that like always stood out to me too. For some, because I saw it multiple times growing up.
Yeah.
But that's hilarious that's her.
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea.
But long story short, she can most definitely spare a square.
Yeah. She can spare
both those women.
Squares.
Yeah, so can Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Both of them.
That's hilarious because they're both these billionaire women
fighting over toilet paper.
That's too funny.
Well, we'll continue this on our Seinfeld show.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, no, Lost Boys, super excellent. I was glad I got to watch it.
Yeah.
Another one to add to the Joel Schumacher repertoire that I'm now growing in familiarity with. And
You loved your sexy sax man.
Yeah, that was the highlight for sure. Greased up, sexy sax man.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's so, I love the indulgence of some of these, I don't know, 80s things. Again, it was just this period which was so characterized by
Cocaine?
Well, no, I was going to say like exaggeration kind of, right?
Well, it's very fun, right? Like,
yeah.
You know, you can kind of break it down to individual things, but it's like, no, you look at all of these different things. It's like, you know, you look at like rock stars at that time and even actors and like wrestling.
The types of movies they were making.
Movies, yeah. Apparently,
like you definitely wouldn't describe it as being a subdued period.
No.
The crazy colors, you know, the use of flashiness colors, all that sort of stuff.
I don't know if that was
neon lights.
I guess it had to have been to some degree a response to the 70s, but the 70s was kind of flashy in its own way too, but the 80s just took it to another level.
Well, yeah, I think of the 70s as being kind of dull in the sense of like a lot of browns and muted tones and things like that. Is what I tend to associate to the 70s and late 60s and stuff.
I guess I was thinking like I was too much focused on maybe like the disco stuff.
Right. There is that for sure.
But yeah. But yeah, no, Lost Boys, it's just, I've seen that movie so many times and it's just a fun one. Although weirdly enough, as when I grew up with it, we watched it on a VHS tape where like probably the first half hour of that movie we didn't have on the tape.
Oh,
so I've always known that movie as starting from when they're eating the Chinese food in the cave.
That's funny.
They're only noodles, Michael.
That's funny because I totally understand that, and it's worth mentioning for any younger listeners. Like, this is the way that it was sometimes. Like, you'd tape something off of the TV, and you know, commercial breaks and all.
Yeah.
But sometimes you didn't catch the beginning of it, and so or maybe not the end of it. Like maybe you ran out of tape before the movie ran out. And I had a couple cases like that. Like we had The Adventures of Robin Hood on video cassette that we'd taped off of TV, and the tape ran out before the movie was through. So it's like the climactic fight scene starts, and then it would just end, and we never knew how it ended.
And it's weird because it's like
for years.
It's like you have all this nostalgia to a portion of the movie.
Yeah.
And then there's like this like little small percentage of the movie that you're like, I don't have this nostalgia for this.
Yeah,
this is like a brand new thing.
What is this weird thing? This isn't part of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was like kind of me. Like I remember the first time I was seeing in Lost Boys when they're it's closer to the earlier part of the movie where they're all like they're getting Michael to go on his motorbike with them, and then like it's just kind of breaking into that 80s song. Yeah. And that's where I was just sort of like, this is how the movie kind of like starts, like really 80s. But yeah, over time I've kind of I've now seen it so many times that even the earlier stuff is pretty nostalgic for me. But it's like, yeah, once it gets into the maggoty rice and worm noodles, I'm like, yeah, this is the real beginning for me. Yeah. Yeah, no, they made some. I think they made a couple of. Well, they definitely made some sequels, and I think they shot them in Vancouver. But it's really. I hate to say it, but you needed the Joel Schumacher magic for those. Yeah.
It's all about that first one, really.
Yeah.
Well, what's next on your list?
I've got, I gotta like hold my list up to candlelight here, so it's just a little tricky. Let me see. I mean, I've already really talked about probably my favorite ones, but I'll talk about briefly, I guess, a movie I saw that just was kind of another random one, but it was an interesting movie. It was a movie called Girly, and this was like one of the coziest horror movies I think I've ever seen.
Oh yeah.
It's a British film, and I think the original title was called like Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny, and Girly, and like they decided to be like, the girl is kind of this like sort of like she's like kind of like the sexual attractive character in this movie, so let's make the whole marketing about her. So they decided to call it Girly, But it's essentially about this, like, yeah, it's like, it starts off with this like girl and boy who are teenagers. They're kind of dressed in old British kind of school uniforms.
Yep.
And they basically go out and they sort of lure men back to their house. And then it's mainly the girl who kind of seduces the guy to come back to the house. And then once they're there, they kind of have this matriarchal mumsy woman who kind of like, they then kind of decide, you know, whether the people that they bring back will be kind of brought into being part of this family, which you discover is not a real family at all. It's basically this like crazy mom character is trying to create her like dream family.
Yeah.
With all of these messed up characters. And so, yeah, like they either these new kind of kidnappers or the kidnappees who kind of realize that they're stuck in this house, they either have to kind of conform and follow the rules and become part of the family, or ultimately they'll get like killed. But the whole movie's kind of done with this like lighthearted, fun, almost like comedy kind of feel, which is probably the intention, is to make it kind of even that much more disturbing.
Yeah.
But I think it is also meant to be like a dark comedy, this movie. But this is like another one of those sort of little hidden gems where I never heard about this movie. I don't ever see this thing being referenced.
Well, when did you hear about it? How did you discover it?
I think I discovered it like maybe even earlier this year. Like I usually kind of look up things, like I look at movie lists or recommendation lists, and if something ever like piques my interest or is just something I haven't heard of before, I'll kind of jot it down or put it on the list. And I guess that's how this movie Girly wound up on there. But I think it was probably just earlier this year that I discovered it, which is maybe why I decided to jump onto it, because I was just sort of like, what is this thing?
Yeah. And when was it from?
This would be like 1970, maybe 71.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's still like in that old, like I kind of think of The Exorcist as the real divider between old horror and new horror.
Yeah.
So it was still like kind of just that movie and that other one I mentioned, The House That Screamed. Like, you know, they were kind of these movies that in some ways seemed modern compared to a lot of really old horror movies, but they still hadn't yet entered what was possible with The Exorcist then existing.
Yeah, okay.
So they still are kind of from this like other time. And yeah, this movie is not like, you could probably, this is a movie you probably could show even a child and it's not going to be too intense for them. But I kind of just liked the weird, like the Britishness of it all, because there's a lot of like, again, it also deals a lot with I guess with British culture. There's a lot to be said about manners and etiquette, and so it kind of plays on that a lot. It's probably a movie that
sounds I would get a kick out of that for sure.
Yeah, and you get the feeling that probably the filmmakers who are also British, they're also kind of criticizing that, you know?
Yeah, okay.
But it's done in a very kind of playful, campy way. And so, yeah, I don't know, if you really like kind of weird, wholesome, cozy British horror that's not really going to be too intense or disturbing, like you could almost
another subgenre. Wholesome, cozy British humor, British horror.
Yeah. Well, because again, even like The House That Screamed was very cozy, even though it was a Spanish movie. It was a Spanish movie almost trying to trick you into thinking it was a British film.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's like, I think I've seen all the brutal stuff. So now that I watch the more random stuff, it's like, oh, it's the weird cutesy, like fun kind of horror things that I'm left to see.
Good. You don't have to be traumatized anymore. You can just settle into this nice period of, you know, lighthearted.
Hey, is that lighter on the table? Because I think my candle's just about to go out.
Oh, no. Hold on a minute. Let me find it. Can't find it. Where is the lighter?
It's weird that the candle's just like dying on its own. Maybe it's a sign.
Yeah. They're like, okay, wrap it up, you guys. Well, I mean, yeah, maybe on that note, I'll you can have a look around for that. I was going to talk about the Pit and the Pendulum. That's the last one that I have to talk about.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is another Vincent Price movie, and there's so many of these old horror films on Tubi, which I've been really enjoying. I've been enjoying the availability of them. I would have liked to watch a whole bunch more this month, but just didn't get around to it. And truth be told, I also didn't get to finish watching The Pit and the Pendulum either. But I got through most of it, I guess. Again, I was watching a lot of these when I was just like, I'd go to sleep late at night and I'd put it on and be like, yeah, let's make some popcorn and doze off to something. And so Pit and the Pendulum, I started watching, and I gotta say, like, there's some disturbing stuff in that movie. Kind of just the story of how traumatized Vincent Price's character is in the movie because of like the things that he witnessed his father doing to their mother, and then they like go and exhume the body and stuff. I don't know how well you remember the movie. But.
Yeah, probably not as well as it's definitely not as fresh with me than it is with you. But I was curious, like, were you familiar with the premise overall before going in?
No, not really, because I know that it is based off of an Edgar Allan Poe work. I don't know if it was a short story or a novel or what. Mm-hmm. But no, so I wasn't familiar with it at all. I'd heard of the title before, and I was like, oh, I got to watch that.
Yeah. The only thing I really just knew was just the iconic scenario of the pendulum blade itself. Like I knew that there was a character strapped to a table with this pendulum. This pen.
Well, and that's a classic old medieval torture device, right?
Yeah.
And they feature a number of them in, like, of course, it's, you know, the torture chamber. He has, like, it takes place in the 1500s, and they have this torture chamber with all these different devices. Like they have a Iron Maiden in there and things like that, and some stocks, and apparently, it's like the story is that Vincent Price's character had witnessed his mother being tortured to death in there for infidelity or something, and then he ends up like using the pendulum slicing device on that other guy towards the end of the movie. But
it's a great suspenseful bit because it slowly is swinging. You know, it's getting closer and closer before making contact, and
and it's such a horrifying prospect. Like they came up with just some sick torture devices back in the day. I went to a museum which was a medieval. This was in Germany, I believe. And it was all these medieval artifacts and stuff. And there was like a torture device section in the museum. And they had just some fucked up stuff.
Oh, Germans, they know how to torture.
Yeah, no shit, right? It's like just god awful. And then there was also a wax museum in Victoria. I don't know if you would have been over there. But
like a Madame Tussauds kind of thing?
It was similar to that. But it wasn't actually Madame Tussauds, I don't think. But it was a wax museum, and I don't think it's there anymore. But they had a regular wax museum upstairs, and then down in the basement, they had
There's always a dungeon, right?
Yeah, there was a dungeon that was dedicated to like medieval torture and stuff. And it was, you know, I loved going down there because I just love like the macabre and whatnot. But
are you familiar with the Tower of London? Because that was a notorious. That was like England's well-known kind of torture chamber, I guess.
Oh,
There's even an old it's not really a horror movie, but it does kind of get lumped into the old Universal horror films because it's got Boris Karloff and he is like he's kind of like the torturer character in the movie.
Okay.
But
this is a movie, The Tower of London.
Yeah. But I think there's even been other depictions since then, but it was kind of I think so. The idea was it was a thing like put in place by like one of the British kings, I guess, maybe one of the more sort of, I don't know, evil or
Ruthless.
Sadistic ones. And so he kind of created this like Tower of London where, again, I think it was especially in like the basement, the dungeon thing was where a lot of these things were happening. And I don't know, like the movie doesn't really go too deeply into it. I mean, again, the movie's probably from like 1939 or 40, so they're not going to go, you know, overly graphic, but it's he almost looks like Frankenstein because like he's bald, but they like elongated his skull, so he's just kind of got this like long like top of his head, and just knowing that he's also a character like you can tell like he enjoys torturing too.
Yeah.
So, but the thing that's creepy about it is you're like, oh, like this is actually historical. Like this was a real thing that
right. Well,
happened.
that's kind of where it is interesting to learn that stuff, and that's maybe what fascinates me a little bit about going to this wax museum and stuff. Is you're like, this is like, these are devices and inventions that they actually created to use on people, and it's definitely brings an added element of making things more horrifying when you understand that it's real, and that it had a place in history. And it's such a cool wax museum because it's very grotesque. So the main reason I brought it up is because they have one of these swinging pendulum devices there, and kind of set up like an animatronic type of wax display. And you just see this guy being slit open as this giant axe blade kind of swings back and forth, and it's just like, man, what a fucked up thing. So yeah, it was cool to see that depicted though in the movie.
And now, would this be your kind of first Roger Corman Poe film that you've seen?
I think so.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, yes.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it sounds like you enjoyed it enough that you might want to check out some of the other. Fall of the House of Usher was another one that I remembered liking quite a bit.
They have a bunch of those on Tubi. And
and Vincent Price is in most of them. So if you're a Vincent Price fan,
no, he's great. I've been really getting to become a little bit familiar with him and enjoy watching him.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why they never did. Because there's a few real classic Edgar Allan Poe stories that they didn't do, and I don't know why. Because they got to the point where they were like desperate for stories that even a couple of them ended up being actually Lovecraft stories.
Okay.
And I was just like, they never did like the Telltale Heart.
Oh, really?
I don't think they did.
That's surprising because that one's such a famous one.
And then I think another one was like Murders in the Rue Morgue. They didn't do.
Okay.
But yeah. There's some. Fun. I mean, obviously, I've talked about in other podcasts, so I've got a lot of affection for The Raven.
Yeah, that's one that I'm definitely gonna watch.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to watch that for a while. But otherwise, that's a wrap on my list. That's everything that I watched this month.
Okay. Yeah.
Notable.
I don't know. I saw a few other Australian movies that one of them I can't actually tell whether I like it or not, but it was definitely an interesting movie. It was kind of like a period piece. Well, I thought it's an Australian made movie, but it's actually set in like pre-colonial America, where like the villains are kind of these like Native Americans, but they're like, they've got like magical powers, and like they like, I don't know, like they come out of like the trees, and it was a really bizarre movie. It was like half of the movie felt like you were actually watching like a historical period piece film, and then these like wacky like forest demons like kind of like then appear. And then like also like one of the main girls, I think a lot of these characters was actually supposed to be Irish. So they were kind of like Irish immigrants in America, but it's filmed in Australia. And it was like made in the early 80s. And it's got some of like kind of that early 80s kind of effects where, if there's kind of weird, if someone has powers, there's kind of these like rays of light that kind of like appear, but they're very like, post-production, almost like drawn and animated stuff like that. Yeah. Which I actually kind of like, because those were kind of the movies I grew up with.
Right,
that kind of effect.
Like Dark Crystal,
yeah.
Willow, has a bunch of stuff like that. I think the Excalibur maybe has things like that.
Yeah. And so, this movie had a lot of interesting, it's almost I
find that stuff very enduring, actually.
Yeah,
I think a lot of kids probably who didn't grow up with it like find it unbearable, but I find it quite bearable. Yeah,
I kind of miss it to a degree. And but another movie I guess I'll briefly throw in here. I don't have much to say about it, but just the concept of it, I gotta just say it out loud. It's a movie called Mr. Frost, and it stars Jeff Goldblum as the Antichrist.
Well, that sounds great.
Well,
I'm sold already.
It's a movie where I'd always see this movie in the video store, And in the horror section, I'm like, what is this? Because you would just see like an image of Jeff Goldblum with like a mullet. And I'm like, is Jeff Goldblum supposed to be scary in
you
this?
lost me.
Yeah. The funny thing is it's like, so when he's not talking, you're like, ooh, he's Jeff Goldblum can be a little bit intimidating. He could be a little bit freaky. But the second he starts talking, he's Jeff Goldblum. He's the most lighthearted, happy-go-lucky Antichrist I've ever seen in a movie ever. And the movie's also, on top of that, the movie's very British. Like, it's essentially a British movie where they then just cast the two main actors with Americans. So, the main guy is Jeff Goldblum and the main actress is an American actress. But they're clearly in England. Even just, I don't know if this is something you relate to, but I can even just tell by the camera stock, like the stock film and the way the way it looks. I'm just like, this is British.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I would be able to tell, but I kind of know what you mean. I
grew up with a lot of British television and movies, and it's a little bit harder with movies, but with television, and I'm pretty sure this was a TV movie.
I think that's where it stands out.
Yeah.
Well, and that probably would have been done in like the PAL format, so maybe that has something to do with it. I think it's a different frame rate. I think it's 25 frames per second.
Right. Yeah.
Which is the standard for over there.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I won't say too much about this movie. I didn't love it, but it was weird, but weird in an okay way. Like, I mean, I accept weird, especially when it's a horror movie, but it's definitely going more for the psychological horror as opposed to jump out scares or goriness. Mainly, I was just sort of like, I need to see Jeff Goldblum as the Antichrist.
Yeah. So was it good? Like, what do you give it out of 10?
I probably gave it a 5 out of 10, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe I might have given it a 6. Yeah, it's
okay.
On a good day, I maybe would have given it a 6, but it just, I didn't fully. I just felt that whatever it was trying to say, it just didn't really seem to translate.
Gotcha.
Well,
gotcha.
And I don't know. There was something missing. There needed to have been something a little bit more shocking in the movie. It's almost like the movie wasn't even meant to be a horror movie, but they're like, well, it is about the Antichrist. I guess it is a horror movie.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's almost like they weren't even trying to go there. But I don't know. Yeah, like it's.
Is it that the movie didn't seem like it knew quite what it was trying to be?
There's parts
like it was unsure of its own identity.
Yeah, there's a character in the movie. He's like probably like the third main character, who's this British guy, and there's just parts that I just found myself unintentionally laughing in certain parts, which is never a good sign when you're watching like a serious British film.
Right.
But I was just like, some of the choices that were made were just kind of funny, and also just this British actor. I've seen him in a few things, and it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen an actor who takes themselves so seriously that their pretentiousness almost comes off comedic. Is kind of how I felt about this particular British actor. And it's really hard for me to go into it unless you were watching it. And it was a sequence where you're almost like, is this a dream? Like, that's the only way that I can justify this scene being so weird, is that this is a dream I'm seeing.
Yeah. What's the name of the movie again?
Mr. Frost.
Oh, Mr. Frost. Yeah, right.
And it was more than anything, it was just kind of like, so it was actually my roommate who recommended the movie. And I knew the movie she was talking about, so she kind of just reminded me of this thing. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just watch it just out of curiosity. It was like a scratch I needed, it was an itch I needed to scratch, where I was just sort of like, what is this mullet Jeff Goldblum movie? I didn't know till I was watching it that I wasn't aware that it was an Antichrist movie until I was watching it. I was just.
Well, sometimes that's a good way to go into it, is like completely unaware of what you're going to see.
I thought he was more just like a serial killer. But it was going to just be like a creepy Jeff Goldblum serial killer. But it was, it's more like he's like institutionalized, and he doesn't, it's like he hasn't talked for like a year until he sees this female therapist, and then he immediately starts talking to her, and they're like, oh, it's a breakthrough. He started talking, and it's like, well, no, he's talking to her. And so most of his scenes are like just weird mind games with him and this doctor in this hospital with other patients.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, it's like I kept kind of waiting for some really kind of like shocking moment or some really creepy thing, and it didn't really happen. But it's not like it doesn't have like the acting is fine and the writing is fine. There's just some really weird choices. The music's very odd. It's this weird synthesizer music that's just very kind of jarring. Yeah, I'm not even bringing this movie up as a recommendation. I'm more so just bringing it up as a
fair
weird
enough.
Random movie that
It's a movie you watched.
I took a chance on. I don't know. I'm not going to talk about the White Reindeer or some of the other just really random shit. White Reindeer was just this Finnish vampire movie about a girl who, I don't know, her husband and this village, like they go hunting for reindeer, and she's like, oh, I want to be with them more. So I don't know if she makes a deal with the devil or what, but she becomes this vampire reindeer. And fuck, man.
A vampire reindeer.
Yeah, and
that sounds great.
And I don't know. It's a Finnish movie, and I haven't seen many of them. So I guess
maybe it makes more sense if you're a Finnish person yourself.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like culturally,
we'll have to ask all of our Finnish listeners.
Because it's also
is there
a period
anybody
piece
out there from Finland.
Yeah,
who understands what this movie's all about.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it needs like a remake or something. And I think at the time, I think what it was praised for more than anything was kind of like, "Hey, Finland, you made a movie. Here's a cookie." And I think it got these like high ratings because of that. But to compare it to a lot of other movies, you're kind of just sort of like, this is kind of silly. It's really not aged well. Like to be honest, the things I liked about the movie the most were the non-horror things, because like you were kind of like, oh wow, like you're seeing these people like kind of on these like, it's all in the winter and they're sledding and there's a lot of like neat stuff. You're like,
you see sort of the culture, like it brings you into the culture.
And I could tell that it was probably a challenging movie to make for like the 50s in Finland that clearly didn't have an industry, and you're shooting this in the snow. I'm like, and the movie's made competently on that level. It's just whenever it's trying to be scary, it just completely fails in every regard. But I think it's almost one of those movies that, like it's kind of listed as a borderline horror movie. It's almost more like a folk tale that, maybe would have seemed creepier with somebody telling you the story. But yeah, I don't know. Again, it was just somehow a movie that fell onto my list, and I'm trying to watch these movies based on their like ratings. And so sometimes these movies that have high ratings, they're high rated because not because they're in any way scary, just because they're maybe competently made, I guess.
Yeah, or unique or whatever.
Yeah. Like, again, it's not like it doesn't have a lot of flaws other than the fact that, I don't know. It's like, it's very easy to just put a couple of fangs on a character and be like, it's a vampire. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I kind of really was hoping to have seen a few more horror movies, but I don't know. In the end, I think you and me, we were so busy with projects and stuff this month that we just didn't get around to seeing as many as we'd like.
I could have spent the whole month just sitting in front of the TV watching all the stuff that I would have liked to get through. Again, lots of stuff that we talked about in previous episodes that I was like, oh yeah, I should check that out, and I should check out this other thing, and that other movie you mentioned, and then plus all the stuff that was on Tubi. Tubi is such a great service. Like it's got so much quality stuff and like old stuff, because I'm really into a lot of these old movies, or I'm curious about them. So there was so much stuff that I could have just sat there watching, and I didn't get around to it, unfortunately, and I'm probably not going to watch a whole lot of it going into next month and December especially. But I tend to reserve a lot of that stuff for October. And so I don't know. We'll see. I'll get around to more of it next year.
Well, we should, we could hold this off until next October, but yeah, if you're ever down for watching An American Werewolf in London, I'd definitely be up to watch that with you.
Yeah, it seems like such a perfect movie to watch in October, leading up to Halloween. We got to get around to it sometime.
Yeah. But. And also, because I don't know how many werewolf movies would you say you've seen? Because to me, like, there's not many.
A lot.
Yeah.
I can't.
I guess you can add Trick or Treat to the list it's
Right.
got at least some werewolves in it.
Yeah, well, that's just it.
But yeah, and it's like it's one of those things where it's like I almost don't even want to hype up American Werewolf too much. The reason why it was also very special to me was just because I saw it at such a young age. But yeah, I mean, it's there's not many werewolf movies that you could even really challenge it up against. But there's a few other ones out there that are also pretty good.
Yeah, well, it's definitely one that we have to get into. Probably not till next year.
Yeah, and it's really funny too. Like that's the other thing you'll realize. You're like, holy shit! Like these characters are funny. Like I don't want bad things to happen to them. But yeah, well, I don't know. Other than that, should we? Is there anything else we want to say before we sign off here?
No, I mean, I think I've really enjoyed going through all this stuff. This has been a great way to kick off our podcast and also to spend the month of October leading up to Halloween. Mm-hmm. I'm really, I've enjoyed the process, and I'm looking forward to celebrating Halloween now tonight.
Yeah.
So we want to wish all of you a happy Halloween. And we hope you've enjoyed coming along for this ride with us too. And it's been a lot of fun.
And also, we don't want to give the impression that that this is the end. That this countdown to Halloween was what this was all about. We're going to continue doing more shows.
Oh yeah, just not Halloween related stuff anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's been great, kind of diving into this and getting into the spirit, and it's been, definitely added to the festivities of things. So happy Halloween, everyone. We made it this far, and we hope you'll join us on the future episodes where we go into all kinds of different stuff. Who knows where we're going to go from here. But
yeah. Maybe even like, I don't know, down the road, if we start getting enough subscribers and stuff, we could even create a scenario where listeners can maybe like vote or pitch titles for us to talk about. Maybe we could
definitely
have them vote, and then the winning vote will be something we can do a show on. Who knows where the format of this series can go? But
exactly.
But we've been having a lot of fun with the Halloween countdowns, and what's great is there's a lot of horror movies that we haven't covered in our countdown, which means that we've still got plenty of material for next Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think we should sign off. It's been good. Happy Halloween, everyone. Enjoy your night. And on that note, I'm signing off. This is Kevin Rosmer.
And this is Oliver Drawson.
Have a good night.